Hey, Rashad, we're on mute right now.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We got some guests, and I welcome each one of the guests and their families. Thanks for joining. And I also welcome the council members. Please join me in standing for the invocation. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for bringing us to your presence to the town hall this evening. Dear God, as we deliberate the decisions and the items before us, we ask that you guide us. Help us to understand the wishes of the people. Help us to represent them and do what is right in your sight and also the betterment of this town. Dear God, we pray for all the leaders and all the staff who work diligently, especially this time of challenges in our town, in our county, in our state, and throughout the world. We ask for your blessings and kindness and protection of the first responders, of firemen, police officers, of medical professionals, and various other essential service employees. We ask that your protection be over them, to watch over them. We pray for the leaders and the president and all the leaders, various leaders of this country and throughout the world, as they try to find a solution for this pandemic. Give us your intervention. Give us a solution. Dear God, as we gather tonight, we have many challenges, many important decisions to make. We ask that you provide us clarity and kindness in every decisions we make. We pray for the council members and staff who are here and those who are on their way here. We ask everything in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. Please stand me join me for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Now time is 6:10, so I'm going to call to order the town council meeting for Tuesday, May 26th. Our time is 6:10. For the record, we have Council Member Eldridge, Mr. Clark, Mr. Egan, and George are present. We fully anticipate other three to join us shortly, but they are not here yet. Council, this is the first time in a long time we get to be on the dais. And some of these things come together very last moment. I want to take a moment to appreciate the staff for working through some of the challenges, especially Joseph, working some of the technology part, and Susan and her team for making this arrangement still so that we can still practice safe distance while engaging in the governmental business. With that announcement, this is the time for council members and members of the staff can make announcement. Council, are there any announcements for tonight? Staff?
Thank you.
Ms. Khatri?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank everyone who came out. We had 2 events, I think, since our last meeting. The Headlights for Hope event where we paid tribute to our hospital workers, our nurses and doctors and other staff there. And then also, we had a great turnout for that event, and I think it was very meaningful to them. So I appreciate everybody who came out for that, made posters, honked their horns. And then we had the partnership with SISD for the senior caravan, senior drive. And I know in my neighborhood, people were lined up and down Stony Creek with signs, and it was just a great time. And, you know, I was very thankful that we could do that to honor our seniors, but also wanted to thank both the police department and the fire department. It was a big undertaking to have such a long caravan, and it went throughout the entire community. So a lot of coordination on their part. And, you know, I've gotten some really nice emails from the school district thanking them and really calling out their great work. So I just wanted to add to that. Thank you.
Anything else?
Mayor, I just want to add real quickly,
Yes,
I've heard from a few parents of seniors, and the seniors were very appreciative of the turnout by the town. I know on Mansfield, where I was at, there were quite a few people lining the streets, and you could tell, you could see it on their faces as they went by that they were very much appreciative. Just wanted to support what Susan was saying there.
No doubt. Also want to recognize the events committee court leaders, council representatives, Mr. Clark and Mr. Freeman for working with the staff to put this together. The other thing I want to recognize is Erica and Susan and her team puts out this beautiful communications, news flashes on a very regular basis. We know we have challenges. We know we have a change of business rhythm and business practices. But I tell you what, staff did everything they can. They are doing everything they can to communicate through social media, through print media and other media to communicate and share information. So, and I want to appreciate the staff for what they do and continue to do. For the record now, time is 6:13 and Mayor Pro Tem Finch arrived. Good evening, sir. So this is the time for public forum. If then anyone from the audience would like to come forward and speak to the council on any matters other than legal or personal matters, please come forward. Joseph, do we have anyone? No hands are raised and no one is coming forward. So I'm going to close the public forum. Consent agenda item. Council, we have one item on the consent agenda. That's the approval of minutes for the regular meeting of the town council for May 11, 2020. Does anyone has any concerns about or questions about item number 1? If not, can I have a motion to approve consent agenda item 1 as presented?
To approve as presented.
Motion made by Mr. Clark and second by Mr. Eldridge to approve consent agenda item as presented. Everyone heard the motion? All in favor signify. All opposed? Motion passed 5-0. We have two special guests here, so I'm going to move to item number 2. I'm going to invite Rachel Ramsey to come and lead this session. This is to discuss, consider, and act upon appointing Janice McKee and Hyatt Simmons as associate judges for the town of Sunnyvale. Ramsey?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you all know, on April the 13th, Town Council approved an interlocal agreement with the City of Seagoville for jail services. The Town of Sunnyvale Police Department will be taking defendants who are in custody to Seagoville for bookend and arraignment. As allowed by Section 5.04B of our town charter, it is recommended that the town appoint the City of Seagoville's judges as the Town of Sunnyvale's associate judges. This allows them to have the powers needed to set and accept fines on all charges, including warrants. And if you have any questions related to that, I'd be happy to answer those. If not, once you take the motion, I have the oath of office.
Council, are there any questions on this topic? You want to call a public comments on this one? Or no? Okay, got it. Sometimes I want to, okay. Okay, I will take public comments on this topic. If anyone from the audience would like to come forward and speak to the council, please do so at this time. Joseph, do we have anyone raising their hand? So star 9 if you like to raise your hand. So no one is coming forward, so I'm going to close the public comments. Council, can I have a motion with respect to item number 2?
So move to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Egan to approve item number 2 as presented. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Fink. Everyone heard the motion? Are there additional discussions? All in favor signify. All opposed. Motion passed 5-0. Good evening, Mr. Allen. The time is 6:17 and we got Mr. Allen. Council, again, thank you judges for being here tonight. Appreciate it. Oh, we got Brother Min, thank you.
So both raise your right hand. We'll just do it at the same time. Repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of office of Associate Judge for the Sunnyvale Municipal Court of the State of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God. Thank you, guys. We're so glad to have you on board. Thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much again for being here tonight. Thanks for your council. With your consensus, I'm going to pull forward item number 10. That is to hear a presentation, then discuss, consider, and act upon narrowing the selection for the location of the new fire station, the top option. The reason being, when people are available on the call, I don't know how many are there. We always try to pull items which require much discussion to the top of the agenda. With that, I'm going to pull that forward. So again, this is to hear the presentation and discuss and consider and act upon narrowing the selection. So with that, I would invite Ms. Guthrie to make the staff presentation.
Thank you, sir. As you know, we have a whole committee that's been working on this along with our hired consultants. And because there's so many of us involved, I'm going to make the initial part of the presentation that's really more the background. And then I'm going to ask Les from Komatsu to come up and actually go over the matrix where we're comparing our options, okay? Okay. So as you know, that you all early last year appointed a CIP committee of citizens who got together and evaluated all of the projects that were listed on the CIP capital improvement plan. That committee looked at the amount of money that they were interested in spending, and they ranked priorities accordingly. The fire station was named as the #1 priority for the CIP committee. At an estimated cost of about $5 million. The existing station, just in case any of you haven't been in it, is a 40-year-old metal building. I have the PowerPoint. Just so that they can see. It's a 40-year-old metal building. It was constructed in 1980, and it does have ongoing maintenance issues. I'm just going to give a second for the PowerPoint to catch up. And if you could just move to slide 3. There we go. It's 1,800 square feet. There's one shower in the station that is shared by all staff, and it also double duties as the laundry room. Obviously, as you know, with the growth of the fire station or fire department over the years, and with having both men and women and a larger staff, it has become a little bit difficult. There are 3 bedrooms that are shared by all of the fire personnel, with 2 firefighters to a room. There's inadequate storage space for gear. You can see in these photos that all of the gear is kind of crammed in small spaces. And if, you know, any of you who've known a firefighter, who've read up on this issue, there's a lot of science that goes behind this now in terms of dealing with health risks for firefighters. And with gear, one of the issues is really having space for the air to circulate amongst their gear. And so obviously this is not optimal. Also, where that space is in relation to sleeping quarters and the area that they socialize in is also really important. Many enhancements in newer stations have been made for cancer prevention, including separating the gear from the areas where firefighters sleep and eat. It's also important to have proper ventilation and airflow around the gear. You can see on the next slide, there is limited administrative spaces. So you can see in this one picture on the top that you have an office space for the captains. You have the space where they are able to relax in between calls when they're not cleaning equipment and doing other preparatory work. And then also the kitchen right there, that's all in one space. So there's really very limited amount of administrative area. And then you see another storage closet. You can stay back on this side. You know, for medical supplies and medicine control, you know, really need locked storage areas so that good protocols can be in place for administering and checking out medications. And then you can see too, just a really tiny office. I think that's Peggy's office that we're looking at there. We can go to the next slide. So one of the things that the committee looked at was our key performance indicators. And these are just a couple. The fire department have many, but these are a couple of the most important ones. And keep in mind that the current station is located at the far northwestern border of the town. And that does have an impact on our response times. So the first thing I started looking at was response times, which is the lower right-hand corner. And having worked in other cities, I'm very familiar with what the national averages are and what the goals are, which is that 80% of the calls are responded to in 5 minutes or less. You can see the blue bar is current year, so we are not meeting our goal in that area. So when I see that as a leader of an organization, I immediately start looking at the components, what makes up that time. One of the biggest ones that you will look at is average turnout time, and that's the time from when the call comes in till they're out of the station rolling on the call. And you can see here that the blue bar is our performance this year. So you can see how much it's improved over the last few years. And then you can see what the goal is, which is 1 minute and 30 seconds. That's actually a blended goal line because there's a different goal for daytime and nighttime response for turnout, just because at nighttime they might be in bed asleep. So to get up, get dressed. But we felt that 1:30 was a good blend of the two goals. So you can see we're well beating our turnout time goals. We're well beating our turnout time goals, which, to me was really positive. That means that we've got professional firefighters who know how to get out of the station in a timely manner. So it really points to things like traffic and location and access to getting to different areas of our community. So
Give me a second, just for the record, that time is 6:26 and Mr. Freeman is here. Welcome.
our next slide, the selection of the design firm. The town council did vote to adopt the CIP plan on June 24th. And during that process, and a timeline was identified to begin working on the station. We issued an RFQ for a design firm on December 5th, and the council voted to award a contract to Komatsu Architecture on January 27th. And that contract was to conduct preliminary design and site selection. Then on March 23rd and May 11th, the town council voted unanimously to issue certificates of obligation for the construction of the fire station and set a not to exceed amount. So you can see that from the February preliminary meetings with the CIP committee, within 1 year, we are now in the process of getting moving on this highly ranked need for our community. When the committee started meeting, we identified several locations that were possibilities, and we actually looked at a lot more, but these were the ones that kind of we felt like could move forward. Like if we never heard back from a property owner about a particular property, then they did not make this preliminary list. So I just, again, reached out to others, but these were the ones that we really started looking at closely. You can see there's Glacier, Jobson, Town Hall, the Daniel property, the Oklahoma tract, Sunnyvale Center, and Kirkland property were the ones we started with. So for several of these sites, we'll I'll kind of walk through the placement and what we were looking at. I can tell you that Sunnyvale Center was removed from contention eventually because they had a prospective buyer approach them about that property. The Oklahoma tract, the contract was placed upon that property, so it's no longer available. Those were the two that were removed kind of right off the bat. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to walk through these slides, but basically these are possible placements on the location. Nothing written in stone, but we had to look at something in order to start doing the ranking process. So this particular location is the Glacier site. Note where the actual building starts versus the green area. The green area obviously would be landscaping or grass. So it starts well back from the property. And I tried to do it kind of in scale so you could see how it relates to the existing barn structures that are there right now. And just a reminder, on this property, we do have another process in progress where we're doing all of the preliminary engineering to eventually build a new barn on this property is the intention. And the idea was that the barn would replace the existing old structures that are there. So you could see the proximity of the station to that. And I think the discussion when we looked at this property was trying to match the design elements to each other. So it just really looks like a kind of an equestrian complex, if you will. So you can see here there's separate emergency and return access to the bay. So you would come out of the station in this scenario on Trip Road, but you would enter the station off of Jobson. Easy access to east, west, north, and south. No floodplain issues. Some fill would be required, and architecture would be designed to blend in with the equestrian theme. The next slide is the Jobson site. As a reminder, the town recently purchased Jobson Park via 4B. So you'll see on the matrix that if we were to go with Jobson Park, there is an amount of money the town would need to reimburse 4B if we decided to use it in that way. Again, the emergency and return access is only on Jobson. There's a little bit of constraints with public parking, where on the other site there was more ability to do that. The access is only on Jobson. There's no floodplain issues, and no fill would be required on this site. Nice and flat. The next slide is actually the town hall site, which if you look out the windows, you're looking at the site that we would be looking at. This is a more complicated build, and I'll let Les address it more when he goes over the scoring matrix. But you can see all the blue area is floodplain area. And so, you know, it's just a lot more complicated. So entering the station, or excuse me, leaving the station, you would have to build a culvert type of system to go over the floodplain area. You can see the emergency access is adjacent to town hall. We would need to put a signal in order to have emergency egress from the property. So that's noted on your scoring matrix. There's floodplain issues, limited space, fill and retaining walls would be required. Staff did feel that there was benefit to having the proximity to town hall. You know, nowadays with everything being so electronic, we don't normally think of that as an advantage, but staff does. You know, we see their fire staff coming in often to get documents signed, payroll issues, meetings, things of that nature. The next slide is the Daniel site. This one, we had several conversations with the property owner, and we could not get them to agree that if we were to place it on their property, that we could be at the other end of the property, away from this traffic circle. I think everyone involved in emergency response agreed that being so close to that circle would be problematic in terms of getting in and out and not being able to have a traffic signal. It would just be really tricky. So it scored very low. You'll see that on the project matrix or on the scoring matrix. We didn't identify any floodplain issues, but there is some like a creek that runs through there at one point. But you know, we didn't spend as much time on this one because we really felt from an emergency response standpoint, it was not a good option. Fill to be determined. The next slide is the Kirkland site, which is almost directly across the street. This is a smaller site, so you know, some work with design would have to happen. Again, there's the proximity to town hall. We would need to do a signal for getting in and out just because Collins Road is such a busy road. There are some floodplain issues. You see the blue on the lower side, but not terribly difficult to deal with. Some fill would be required. And the station that's laid out here is just a mock-up, but it's pretty typical, and it's the square footage that fits within our budget and also fits the needs of what we are wanting, which is to include adequate space for rooms that allows us to grow as our community grows. It includes an emergency operations center and administration so that everyone could be in this station. On the next slide, I'm actually at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Les. And I think that mic up And I'll let him go through the criteria right up there at the podium.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Les Edmond. I'm with Matu Architecture. Our office is located at 3800 Hewlin Street in Fort Worth, Texas. My second time before you, and I appreciate the chance to come back. A lot of things have happened since I last spoke. None of which is any more important than our current situation, mask and distance. But what we did, we met several times, both in person and via GoToMeeting to develop this site selection criteria. We came up with 7 criteria points, components, both with my staff, my architectural staff, and with Susan and with Chief Kendrick to come up with these 7 items. They're fairly simple in terminology. I may need to explain them a little bit because once we develop these 7 items, we had scored. And so that gets into it somewhat of a discussion as to 5. So I will go through these fairly quickly. If you have any questions about them, please stop me. The first one, architects, engineers always look at utilities. Oh my gosh, we're going to have to go a long way to get water. All of these are in your area, that residential area that has all these. If there is something that needs to be extended, it would be probably electrical or data, and that's easy. But everything else is in place. So we didn't really feel that was a huge issue with any of the sites. I'm sorry. The next one is titled site issues, but let me explain that a little bit. What we were looking at is just, and Susan mentioned a few of the items, is that which sites have triggers to cost a little bit of money. In other words, are they steep sites? We have a lot of fill, like she mentioned on this site, this town hall site. There are floodplain issues that are going to cost money. So is it heavily vegetated like this site? We're going to have to clear it. So that was that item of criteria. Construction issues, again, this is a money issue. Is it, we feel like we love this town of Sunnyvale, but your soil is not great. We are probably going to have to, just like this building was built, probably on piers, probably a structural slab. So we kind of had to score that as if it was going to impact the site. They all scored pretty much the same on that one. There are some other issues that we put into this item, and that is if there's a lot more paving that would be required, getting back to the apparatus bay or to circle around it and that sort of thing. So we wanted to quantify that one. The next one, Susan mentioned also, is acquisition cost. You own 3 of them. However, the Dobson, maybe some money changed hands to make that one work for something that's not a park. There's 2 of them that we haven't really determined the cost, but there's a cost. So that one, that's how we scored those. Response times, all the sites are pretty much in there as with regards to response time. There is one that, and Chief may need to answer this one as well. The Daniel site with the reconfiguration of Collins and the roundabout, I don't think we've really determined what that response time is, just because we don't know. We haven't driven it yet. Access and traffic. We looked at sites that had 2 ways in and out. In other words, you go north, you go south, and east. There's sites that are like Dobson, you just go one way. There are sites that are going to have to be signalized. So again, a money thing. So we wanted to quantify that. Community context, that one's a little bit vague, probably sounding, but we were looking at sites that may have some community input needed, some issues of interest groups that want to discuss the project, And there's some that are pretty much a slam dunk, so not a whole lot of issues to cite. So those are the 7 criteria. Then we went on to a spreadsheet to actually score them. And we did that on several different meetings with the police department and with Susan's staff and with my staff to develop those. I'm sorry, I'm still not doing it quite right, am I? And so you can see that utilities, everybody scored the same. The sites are not an issue there. Site topography or the site issues, you'll notice that those vary somewhat. Glacier being relatively easy, high numbers for them. Oh, let me just explain overall what you're seeing here is the higher number is a more, is a better site. And I say that both from a fire design standpoint and the economics of the site itself. So 10 is good, 1 not so good. The next one, again, that kind of vagueness of this construction. Again, all the slabs are going to be pretty much the same no matter which site. The additional paving and parking required on the sites varies slightly from site to site for construction. Site acquisition is pretty simple. If it doesn't cost any money, it's a 10. If it costs money, it's not. So that's pretty simple. Response time. The way it was broken down is that they're very close, between 7 minutes and 3 minutes, and you score from 10 to 0. So not a whole lot of minutes. I mean, that is important, certainly to the fire department, but what we did was establish those response times and then assign a number to them. Obviously, or not obviously, but Glacier is one of the higher scoring sites with a 10, 3.8 minutes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Right. A question here is on Jobson Road. No, tell you what, I'll hold my thoughts and come back. Keep talking. I'll
Oh,
come
okay.
back to you.
The site access and traffic. That one, again, Glacier scored high because it's the only one that's actually on a corner where we can exit. The emergency exit comes off towards the south, and then the return leg of the station would come off of Jobson. So that one made a lot of sense in that it's easy to get in and out of that site, and there's 2 artery streets available to it. So that was the high scoring on for Glacier. As Susan mentioned, both Kirkland and, well, again, we're struggling a little bit with the Daniel site just because the unknown of the circle. But the projects that are on Collins, both Kirkland and Town Hall site, will probably need to be signalized. And again, that's a financial issue with the site itself. The last one is community context. We scored, I'll start with City Hall. We scored, Town Hall. We scored it high because we feel like we can't really see that there would be any opposition to having your town hall embrace an admin for your fire department and fire building. The other ones, again, they're in neighborhoods. You're going to probably have to have some town meetings, and neighborhood meetings to talk it through. Get the design up and running, get community input. So that one, those we scored less than 10. Kirkland scored high also just because it's not very close. So that's the criteria, and then how we actually scored them. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on this part of it.
That's council, if it's okay with you. Let me take the public comments. I'll come back and give everybody a chance to ask questions with us and staff. I also want to hear from chief at some point of time, but that'd be okay? Council, is it? I'm sorry? You may take your seat. I'll call you back in a second. Now I'm going to open up for public comments. Is there anyone from the members of the audience would like to come and speak to the council on this topic? Please come forward. Or anyone like to raise their hand, you may do so as well. No one is coming forward from the members of the audience. Are there any raised hands? No raised hands, so I'm going to close the public comments. Chief, can I have you here for a second and talk about your thoughts, please? Good evening, sir.
Mayor and council, how are y'all?
Just want to ask you your thoughts about the whole
Okay.
process. Anything which fireman likes more than the other, at least in general. You don't have to be very specific, but trying to get what's most. I know you are part of the grading and rating system. I know that. But I want to give you an opportunity to speak.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you. It has been a challenging, usually when you do fire station sites, number one is you want to look at what the city owns or town owns, these type of situations. When I first got here, that's what I was looking at. What locations, if we were ever to build a fire station, where some town owned. Jobson at the early end was on my radar. Simply the fact is that it was a town-owned property, or could be at that time, in discussions there as where we are now. So it wasn't too much, but then again, I knew Stony Creek was coming in, and so with Stony Creek, that would give me the opportunity. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Would give me the opportunity for us to go east-west with Stony Creek, so we could connect over to the Collins Road. Glacier at the time was really just kind of out there. Nothing really zoomed in on the Glacier at the beginning. So then we started looking to the other sites, as you've seen here. And we knew some of them were going to be more expensive than the others. Typically the fact of you didn't want to spend all your construction money on the preparation of the ground and so forth. So, and then when there was talk about the Daniels property, as Les alluded to, is we really didn't zoom in on that one too much because of the circle around there and all the traffic jammed up. It was just going to be really a nightmare as far as the in and out. As Glacier became more available, if you will, we started looking at that, which again is property that's owned by the town, and it also gives us availability of one east, west, north, south, which is a tremendous help for us as far as in our response times. The other thing about or fire department locations that you always, I compare it to a wagon wheel. You always want to be at the hub in a community, and then as the community grows, then you branch out with the spokes, if you will. So that's still in the central location. I know we still have a lot more miles to cover, but we want to look at our response areas as far as in fires and medical emergencies and residential and things like that, and the possibility, obviously, you want to do growth. For me, we want to work very hard to provide you with facility and a location as the town grows, so that will kind of somewhat give you a pause of when you feel like you're going to need to build the next fire station. So that's where we're at, trying to put all these locations together.
Thank you, Chief. Council, are there any questions for staff or Les or Susan, anybody? I know Susan sent everybody the charts that earlier. I'm sure you guys talked through it. Mr. Egan?
Chief, just a real quick question. Not that this is saying the direction I'm thinking or anything, but has there been any discussion about the Glacier track location and the horses so nearby where the trucks are, where the fire trucks will be coming out? Because I know you can run silent for a certain distance, but I don't know that you'll always be running silent. And has there been any discussion about that?
Well, usually, in a fire station location, you're cognizant of all the surroundings as far as, neighborhoods and that sort of thing. And in this case with the horses, yes, you're correct. There is a silent mode that we certainly would adhere to. And in that location specifically, that I don't feel like we're going to have that much traffic where it's going to be really a necessary thing for us to bust out of there with lights and sirens as far as that goes.
And you don't think you'll need to signalize it either because the traffic counts will never be high enough?
Not at this time, no, sir.
My main concern was the animals, because people can complain to us, but animals can't except for in their health. And I would hate to see that horses begin to have mental anguish. I know it's something that maybe think to laugh at, but it's a reality that horses and all animals go through that. And I just want to be sure that we've thought through that with regard to that particular site.
I feel like the firemen and their families coming out and seeing the horses, I think the horses will be treated very well. Oh, there you are.
And as close as you can, we're getting some feedback from the public that they're having trouble hearing.
I'm trying to respect your distancing space as well. So, are there any of these sites that you feel that just do not work? That there's way too many issues to deal with for you to want to have your fire station?
Well, Councilman, it's all about, we want to look at costs, as I mentioned earlier. That's a big thing. You want the facility, but you want to try to do as much dirt work, construction that piers cost a lot of money. When you there's a lot of piers required in the fire station. So you definitely want to look at those type of things. Town hall is our example of, there's some big challenges next door with town hall. And of course, the other ones, it just seems like for better response in times, it's really, we're looking at the Glacier and Jobson's would be my two choices. And if you wanted to really zoom in with the park and everything at Jobson, with the kids and things like that, it kind of brings me back to the Glacier out of the two as far as my opinion goes with the response times and all the material that's been presented tonight.
Yeah, Mr. Eldridge?
So, Chief, I want to understand a little bit better on how you guys came up with the response. So the response times based on averages to the edges of the city, or are they based on averages to major development areas? Like, how do you get those times?
It's an ISO insurance, an NFPA for 5 minutes. It's not a matter of where in town, it's a matter of getting there within 5 minutes. That's the response time. That's where it's called, and all fire departments operate off that response time. So when response times become further out because of the development of the community, that's when they decide new fire station. And that's the other thing of where we're at with, and where we're at with the two properties is we're giving a little more proximity, because right now we have very extended long response time on south of 80. And so we're really trying to get back into that wagon wheel hub and stay with as much in 5 minutes as we can.
Mr. Allen?
I'm not sure that you're the right one to ask the question. Perhaps it's the staff member on the ratings, but I'll ask you since you have the mic. I'm good. What are we looking for? Yeah, it's on. So here's my question with regards to the community context rating. Both Glacier and Jobson have a 5.0 rating. And my question doesn't have to do with the preference. other. I'm just curious how Jobson, town bought specifically for a fire station, so everybody, if I'm right, that I bought that land, are we looking at the same corner of land?
You're talking about the corner.
Yes. Yes. Disregard this, I just went,
No, that's fine.
I went COVID first.
It hurts.
Mr. Allen, are there any additional questions? Mr. Finch?
So again, Chief, this may not be your, question for you to respond, maybe more how our ratings were done, but I heard, Les, when he was presenting, he made a statement that said Glacier scored higher because we had it on a corner. And so I'm curious how, I realize that how you put your station, how you turn in there on that corner, but how did that play into our overall ratings as far as rating it higher? And I'm gonna have a follow-up question to that as well. On our response times, kind of back to Mr. Eldridge's, Councilman Eldridge's point, is that Jobson is 3/4 mile, land we just bought is 3/4 mile from our current site, and I'm curious how we went from 3.8 minutes to 5 minutes on 3/4 mile on response time. Seems like we have. I'm just curious how a 3/4 mile makes up that kind of difference in our response time. Okay, great. I'm sure they did. There's probably things I don't know, so.
Good, Ms. Peggy. Thanks for being here tonight. Would you mind holding the mic, please?
When I figured the response time, I did it based on locations throughout the city at the same time and then from these locations that we've cited here. The difference is that on the Glacier property, you have the ability to hit 80, you have the ability to hit Beltline, Collins, and then Town East quicker than you do from Jobson Park. And it just takes that time to get down to the corner, whether you go Jobson to the service road, whether you do Trip to Collins to 80, there's just more access to different routes to get around the city. Does that answer the question?
Thank you, yes.
Yeah, to that point, so we overlaid where we get our calls from, basically where we're responding to. So building basically a heat map, right? So data analytics, you say, I get a heat map, right? Most of my stuff's on 80, better be close to 80.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And we actually used a heat map for the calls that we had used over the last several years.
Okay.
Now, when we get into the heat, well, thank you for that. When you see the heat map, let me give you some explanation for that as well. First of all, the big red dot, well, that's the assisted living. That's where we do get a lot of calls. It's condensity, 72 beds, so forth and so on. We do get a lot of calls there. The 80 corridor, if you will, that is that's a challenge for us because the address on 80 by the state is different from the addressing by Sunnyvale. So that's where we come up with different addresses, but it also makes it look green, and mostly those are for your traffic accidents that you see or you hear about on 80. So that's kind of where it's green there. But if you really look up above in the areas that we're really trying to focus, around the blue square and the red square and the yellow square, the blue square is encompassing the Glacier property. That's where the majority of a lot of those heat spots, as you mentioned, are in that area with our residents. And you can see if you really focus, some of it does turn yellow. The belt line that you see there, that's a lot of the retail and a lot of our medical facilities that are now in Beltline. We've got a children's pediatric office along with a doctor's office or a couple of doctor's offices that we respond into that area off the Beltline. Currently what we're doing from our old station to answer the calls on 80 or south. The guys usually go down Beltline, so you've got like 4 traffic signals, and that's where maybe a 3/4 mile will be a big difference when you're talking about the signalizations that we go through, and obviously the stop signs and things like that. So, 3/4 of a mile, a minute makes a big difference. I know there was a question posed to me earlier about, well, what's the difference between just a few minutes? Well, the fire increases intensity every minute. And then, of course, life in an EMS role is 4 minutes. So you can see there's a lot of adding and subtracting that we really try to focus on, especially with our limitations of the area that we have.
That answer your question? Are there additional questions for staff? So let's, I have one question for you, sir. When we did the map for jobs, can you pull up the comparison chart for me, please? Just, can you move backwards a couple more, the table out there? So here, sir, on Jobson, I understand the signalization and the cost, all of them, I got it. Jobson currently, Town East is there an access to Town East or solely to Jobson? We start from there. Only Jobson? Okay, so signalization in the future is not a concern. Okay, I was wondering when Town East became wider, do we need to be thinking about spending money, but no access to Town East, right? Maybe I know first.
I'm sorry, I was fumbling.
Now,
with my
I was asking here, if from Jobson, if there is an access to,
Oh.
goes to Town East, then we need to be thinking about signalization in the future.
Oh, I see, yes,
So she clarified that there's no
okay.
Town East. Right. Not Jobson, I'm talking about to the fire station access. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna look at the picture one more time. That's fine.
Well, maybe I can clarify, Mayor. The fire station, as they have it shown on Jobson at the park, only accesses Jobson. It only accesses Jobson. Now, however, when Town East gets widened, fire trucks are going to have to go down that short length of Jobson to hit Town East, to either go east or west. There may be a signal required there at that time. Maybe.
And there was a question earlier about the corner site. Architecturally, I'm going to speak as an architect. When sites are presented to us by fire departments and by cities, corner sites always float to the top. And the main reason from my standpoint is keeping public traffic as far away from the emergency apron of the fire hall is very important. This one having an admin portion of it, I think that if we can separate those two the further away, so that if you're coming to the station for a meeting or from the EOC or whatever, you don't in any way impact that emergency apron. That's why Glacier scored higher than the ones that are just face the street.
I do have one other question, Mayor,
Yes, sir.
related to the heat map. Chief, you may want to answer this. Do we place any greater weight? Do we place any greater weight on a highway situation versus a residential potential issue? I.e., would you place a greater weight on a house fire as you would over a 1050 or a major accident?
Oh, protecting our residents is our priority. So the residential is not just in the fire situation, it's also the EMS situation that we want to be there for the for the residents. And that's where you typically look at is in your residential areas for your emergency responses, that you certainly want to be able to be there.
If you can go forward to that heat map, if we look at this heat map, I mean, if I just looked at it, I would say, oh my gosh, we need to put it down here because maybe C, because if you look at all the calls we get on 80 and Collins in that intersection, it may go up. So what you're telling me is that even though that may have greater call volume, we would still look at our residential, we place greater weight on our residential responses. Is that what you're telling me? On our residential issues?
We look at protecting the residential areas because you're not just looking at just a certain amount of call, like a wreck or whatever. You're looking at the overall calls of fire alarms and assisting the citizens, for falls and any kind of a medical. But the other part about trying to zero in is, in this particular case, building a fire station, you also want to look at what that fire station is going to be able to do with the future growth, i.e. the Lupton property when it ever becomes, collecting the density up there. We still want to be able to have access to that area. So the residential, in the fire station or in the fire department, 80% of calls is medical. So if that kind of puts a little perspective on it for you.
Thank you, Chief. And I think it's is it NIMS rating that we look at as we move forward? What's that rating that ISO rating? Okay, not NIMS, the ISO rating. So when we look at for our ISO ratings, what do they look at? What kind of criteria do they look at as far as where your station? They look at response times. I know they look at equipment and other things like this, training and things like this, but when it falls into response times and as far as your heat map, does any of that play into your rating from ISO as to where you're located versus where you have response?
It's a portion of it. It's based on how many firemen you have, per capita type thing. It's got a lot to do with what you mentioned, but it also is collective with, public works and that sort of thing. So anything at this particular time would certainly help us.
Can I just add a couple of brief comments? And the chief said it, but I don't know if y'all heard it, so forgive me if I'm repeating. But one of the issues with the accidents along 80 is the addressing is not really good. So, and I was just talking to Peggy in the back about this. When our heat map picks them up, that might not be really where they are.
Oh, so the data could be skewed a little bit. Well,
Yeah. And he said it, so I'm not.
yeah, no, it's a good point.
Yeah, so I just would be cautious about looking at how it kind of plays out over 80. It could be, it could be closer to Collins, it could be farther. And, they struggle with that even on responses, but it is one of the things I wanted to point out. And then the other is the intensity of the assisted living homes. We get a lot of calls there, and a lot of them are non-emergent. Am I speaking?
They need to move somebody back to their bed or whatever
Yeah.
it kind of calls, assistance calls.
Right.
People will leave Sunnyvale Hospital.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting enough treatment, so forth, so on. So they walk across the street, or now they go to QT. So we get a lot of that type of traffic as well.
Susan, to follow up on your question about the addressing, will our 911 transition help with our addressing issue?
It will help with our addressing. We have a whole facet of that project that is confirming all of our GIS data. We actually hired a GIS consultant. I don't know that it's going to help a lot on 80 just because of the nature of, it's a freeway and where they enter to get to the crash, it just depends on where it's at. So I think they usually call out kind of between this and this so they know where to get out onto the freeway. But the other thing Peggy talked a little bit, but because I'm a layperson, so I asked a million questions. So, what's second nature to these all, I really had to strive to understand what was the methodology for the scores. And you touched on it, like, how could it be such a difference when they're so close together? And it legitimately was tracking times at particular times of day. So, you know, if we're tracking the time at 5:30 during rush hour, your response time is going to be dramatically different from Town Hall than it is going to be from that corner of Glacier. And so that took me a long time because I was so skeptical. And so we went over it and over it. And that's a big part of this is what is the impact of traffic? And that particular location scored so much better because there are so many ways to get out of there. You can go, you know, north, you can go, you know, any direction versus when you're on Collins, you're going on Collins. And if it's in the middle of school rush hour, you know, the one unknown that we didn't have was what's going to be the impact when we go to 2 lanes in each direction? How will that, you know, benefit us? There's a good possibility that it will benefit us in that, on that location.
Is that been taken into account in this scoring, or that's too complex to do it?
Too complex. We had to go with what was now. We did feel like there probably was some gain, but also you have the, you know, detriment of now I have to put in a traffic signal to stop the traffic so I can get out and make, you know, a left or a right-hand turn. So we felt like likely the gain was offset by what you would lose.
Just, can you go back to the chart one more time? The reason I asked the question to you here is, right, you know, we strictly look at the numbering system, right? It's 8.7 for Glacier on a scale of 10, 7.2 for Jobson, but Town Hall is slightly better, 10.7, half a point. And again, there's the response time and all that goodness which played into it. But when Chief was speaking, he said his top preference is Glacier and Jobson. I'm sure you're talking from your perspective of response time and how the firemen operate, not the entire money part baked into it. Is that a fair statement, Chief? Or you're still thinking the Jobson is your number 2?
Well, looking at your ratings, I mean, when you pull a 10 for the utilities and you're pulling some of those large numbers for the normalcy of the sites and the construction and thing, you know, you run neck and neck, but then when it really gets down to your acquisition and are we paying for something like, again, that adds to the cost of the construction? So when then you get down to really looking at any differences, you're looking at Glacier and Jobson by the side access and traffic. You know, 'cause like I said, the rest of them are there. It's just all about your traffic ability.
Understood. I'm asking between Town Hall versus Jobson, right? Town Hall is rated slightly higher. So purely number-wise, Town Hall is better option than the Jobson. But your statement earlier was you prefer Jobson. That's the reason.
Yeah, it was as it is right there, ABC. Those were the 3 top choices that we really zoomed in on, if you will. So that's where we're at. Then you start breaking it down.
And you see that with Town Hall, a lot of the points were lost, you know, was the incremental cost to construct there because you know, it's about $400,000 to $500,000 more to build on this land. And that's with, you know, a lot of unknowns still, but just the pretty obvious things
That number could be higher, right?
could be higher.
You're going to ask a question? Right. Sorry for the mic. Council, are there any additional questions? Mr. Egan, I'll let me come back to you. Go ahead.
Just one thought that kind of occurred to me with regard to the idea of putting the fire station anywhere along Collins where it requires signalization. And yeah, we're probably going to go to 4 lanes, somewhat divided at some point in time in the future versus in either of the 2 sites that end up being effectively on Jobson Road. And if you look at the park site, the site furthest to the north, while granted we have to be worried about and concerned about today, as the town grows into the future, 190 goes through, we end up with 4-lane divided on Town East, but the fire station is not literally connected to Town East, it's connected to Jobson. It just seems to me like we get a good thoroughfare relatively close to the fire station when it's at the park and on Jobson that we would never get if the fire station ends up being on Glacier. Because Tripp and and Jobson are always, from my perspective, or at least for as long as I'm probably gonna be alive, are probably always gonna be two-lane country asphalt roads. We've never talked about Tripp being improved much beyond what it is today. Whereas Town East, we know it's going to improve.
But Jobson, it would stay this.
Yeah, Jobson would stay the same. So you still got that same, whatever that distance is, whatever period of time it takes to get from the fire station to Town East. But once Town East improves, which is going to go kind of along with the development of the area over, it may take 20 years, I don't know. But you've got that improved access going to Town East, and you're not having to make that you're not going to have ever with the Glacier property. It's just a piece because you'll never have better traffic conditions or road conditions at the Glacier property. I'm not saying one or the other. I'm just wanting to bring up a point that I think might be a valid point. I don't know how much weight we want to give to it. But the other thing I think that needs to be somewhat thought about that came to mind is using our neighbor to the north, Garland, who for 30 some odd years had a fire station on Broadway at South Garland High School. And they've abandoned that now. I don't know if they abandoned it because they just felt like there was a better location. But quite frankly, when I used to work over in Garland and had to drive by that fire station every morning along with the South Garland High School traffic, it was a nightmare. So it supports what you're talking about, Chief, with regard to, and Les as well, about trying to keep that fire station off the intersection. And I'll admit, I was part of the crew of at the P&Z level that thought that getting that corner that Mr. Allen, you were talking about earlier, that has been discounted, we all kind of thought it was a good idea because we got that corner effectively for nothing. But now I see the light better because I've been better informed at this point.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's run down Tripp before knows that Tripp gets pretty busy, right? A lot of people jog down there, ride their bikes down there, traffic gets bad, especially when 80 backs up, right, due to accidents, because they use Tripp to pass around and get around it, right? So is that really going to your equation around idea if we need a traffic stop at Tripp and Jobson, put it at Glacier? I would say it's a definite, you need it.
I mean, that's always the possibilities of the future as you gentlemen are talking, you know, and we're trying to say, we're trying to get prepared for the future. You know, as much as I've been involved in youth sports, you know, Jobson starts developing into a nice park as we talk. You know, now we're going to have the kiddos running around and the parents and all that around the park and the parking lot and all that. So when we're talking about the possibility of traffic on Tripp or Jobson or Collins, I'm also now thinking too, is if we're going to develop a park, then we are going to have that traffic of the parents and the kids running around. So, you know, it's a tough call. It is. But when you start looking at the future, then where do you want to put the priorities?
Mr. Freeman? A couple of points. One, I was going through and kind of looking at the numbers. The difference between, call it Glacier and Jobson, is basically 10 total points, 5 of which are represented by us making 4B a payment of $200,000. That money, though it is an additional cost of the town, goes directly back to the town's benefit. So though there is a cost, that number to me, I mean, if you really think about it, we're 50-50 with 4B on Glacier. You know, we went with them to kind of direct them to purchase Jobson with the understanding that we would probably take half of it from them at some point. So I really don't see that as, yes, it is a cost. However, it's a cost that I think is kind of baked into what we've already kind of got thought of. Second off, as far as there being sports facilities and a fire station, I played baseball growing up at Vanston, and Vanston always had a fire station right there. And I don't ever remember it causing any issues. It was actually quite a benefit if something ever happened to kids. So as far as if a sports facility does show up,
Could it create more traffic? Yes, but I don't see it as being a major hindrance on my side.
You do have a resident or somebody who's raised their hand online.
We took the public comments already, but come back and made a comment. Council, other additional discussions on this?
One other question, Mayor. In relation to Jobson, I saw a representation of the land it would take. And I wonder about the accuracy of that, because it didn't seem, if you look at the drawing in comparison to an actual house that was next to it. And so I think we want to consider the real fact of how much space this would take of Jobson or any land. What's the total footprint of the,
Well, Les
Fire
is
project.
looking at that. Normally, we say you need 2 to 3 acres, but we know that Kirkland's property is only 2 acres. So you can see how that particular piece fits on Kirkland's. That's about a 2-acre piece. And was,
can you go to that slide, please,
Yeah.
on the Jobson slide?
was that to scale, Les? We moved it at the last minute. Originally, we had it up against the ball fields, but then we felt like that would hinder future development of the park. Keep going backwards.
Can you repeat what you just said, Susan?
Yes, sir. Let's get to the slide and then I'll show you.
Yeah,
Right
right
there.
there. Okay.
So originally, when they laid it out closer to the ball field. And then we ended up moving it to that. I mean, it could go either direction. Again, these are just very preliminary, just to show you how it kind of fits on the site. But originally, just the architect put it closer to the ball fields. And I think we were thinking, well, if we end up doing anything in terms of park, it made sense to move it one direction or another to allow for that development of parklands. Was this to scale?
You've got a good eye. I can see, and Susan's right. We did this relatively quickly. We had it closer to the ballpark, and then we slid it, ball field, and we slid it down. Honestly, I'm going to need to go back to my computer drawing to verify that size.
It just seems, if you look at it,
You're
just
right.
doesn't
You're
add
right.
up. Some doesn't add up. And I just want to make sure we have a real representation of
Yes, yes.
what would happen there, and is there really any usability, or what usability would
Yes.
happen? If we decide that whole site's now a fire station site, then fine.
Yes,
But I just want to make sure we understand, if we make that decision, that's what we would be doing.
right.
And so, yeah, thank you.
Correct. No,
The station, just, the whole layout is obviously much bigger. It's probably 2 to 3 acres, but the actual building is 12,000 square feet. So it can give you a good,
Yeah, if you look at that house to the side, that may be a 4,000 square foot house, but it's a
Mhm.
2-story. So I just wonder. Anyway, you've made your point, and so I appreciate you going back on that. Thank you.
Yeah, other additional discussions on this topic? from the council?
Mayor, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
When it comes to safety, generally, money should not ever be an issue, in my opinion, in the world I work in. So my question is, we have 3 locations that we're somewhat looking at. It appears to be narrowed down to those. Money not being a factor, chief, or one of those locations better than the other? To me, I'm looking at this and saying, hey, I got 60 seconds difference from one to the other. I don't see a nominal difference, or it looks nominal to me. I don't see a huge difference between the locations. So if money was never an issue in this selection, is one of those sites clearly a benefit to our town now, and maybe with a vision of 5 years from now?
To answer your question, I would pose the Glacier because of the fact it's on the corner and it's more centrally located by just a few minutes, if you will, from where the Jobson is. That's my answer to your question.
Significantly better or just better? Because I think that makes a difference in my mind when I'm looking at this. We're looking at 60 seconds between 3 facilities.
Yeah, but you're looking at 60 seconds further out from the south part of town too. you know, we're bumping sometimes 14 minutes over there. So anytime we can get closer by whatever time-wise, it's still more in the centrally located and accessibility for us. Instead of going down Beltline, we can go to Jobson and hook the service road.
Chief,
and
let me
then-
help you. Let me help you. Can you explain what does 1 minute means in terms of fire?
Well,
You said something earlier. I'm just gonna bring it back.
Again, fire doubles in its size, you know, every 30 seconds. So that's what we're looking at as far as in that term. If we get an EMS call, you know, death is after 4 minutes. So for us, time is very critical. I mean, that's why we're even doing our response times from the room into the trucks to get out there, because time is a very critical factor for us. And that's what we look at, is the time.
And 80% of our responses are EMS, is that right?
That's correct. And that's pretty much a national standard.
How many house fires have we had in the last 3 to 5 years?
Define house fire.
I don't know. That's why I asked you.
Um,
I know that we've had 2 burned down that I can remember in the last 5 years. I was just curious.
Those are major fires. Now, we've had some fires where we call them room and content fires, where we were able to obviously get there a lot quicker. We had a lightning strike not too far in the mayor's neighborhood. We had a lightning strike that the oven was on fire. If we got there any later, then we would have had a kitchen fire, just from the oven and the walls and from the lightning strike. So time is of essence for us. But you're right on the major fires, too, since I've been here, a lot of room and content fires, utility rooms, kitchen fires, patio fires, that sort of thing. That time has been a factor.
Are there additional discussions or questions from the council on this? I know we took public comments, but I was told by Ms. Guthrie that someone raised their hand.
Yes, we have a hand currently raised, and we also have some questions. Someone asked me to read the questions and didn't want to speak themselves.
Yes, if you want to go and ask the question, if you can start from the question, we'll come back to the,
And these are, I guess, more comments, but this user, James Barta, posted 3 comments. I would think the Jobson site would score a lot better than the Glacier site, because even though it is by a community, it is quite set apart. Second comment, the Jobson/Trip corner is a high traffic area with cars frequently stopped and waiting to make turns. Wouldn't a straightaway without a stop on Jobson be an easier, quote, quick and out, quote, than where cars may be sitting? The third comment is, when scoring costs, foundational costs are an enormous cost, especially in areas near a floodplain, not even necessarily in the floodplain. How much has that been looked into for the Glacier location? Has there been an estimate? Those are the 3 comments from James Barta, and we also have a hand raised.
so Les, do you want to try to address some of those questions? Would that be the right person, Susan, would that be you? Thank you, Chief. Susan, anytime you feel like you can answer better, please do.
Yeah, please. Please bear in mind that the town of Sunnyvale hired Komatsu to do a kind of a 2-step process. And we're sort of not even to step 1 yet. We're trying to determine which sites to actually drill down and look at. After that, we'll take 1 site and actually do a more in-depth design, a full-blown cost estimate, and a geotech report for the soil, so we know how to design the foundation as well as the topographic map. So there is some information that's going to be provided to the town with structural foundation costs, structural foundation design, and costs. We just don't have those numbers tonight.
Fair enough. I think some of them are related to the scoring criteria, right?
So exactly what Les said is that we're at the step right now where we just want to find out where we want to spend money to look further at the site. And if you go to the last slide in the PowerPoint, it talks about next steps. And you see here that we're trying to get you to narrow down to 2 sites, either 1 or 2 sites. And then we will have Komatsu do a much more in-depth analysis. Now, the person who posted is correct. We're well aware that there's some big incremental costs when you're doing foundation work on a site that might be on a floodplain or adjacent to a floodplain. So on the scoring matrix, you see that there was an estimated 300,000 cost, and it really, our discussion with the architect, because we pressed them, we said, give us a ballpark of what it could cost us extra to build here. And they said between $300,000 and $500,000. Plus, we have a traffic signal on this site. So we're now to $400,000 to $600,000 more to build on this site. But that would need, a lot more work to confirm those numbers. But, that's why that's on the scoring sheet, is because we are aware that that is a much harder build. Correct, Liz?
Thank you, Ms. Guthrie. Joseph, who is next?
Okay, the next person is someone named Don. I'm going to spell the last name, Girocco. And their hand is raised. They also posted a question, will fire vehicles be using Mitchell as a cut through? I'm going to allow this person to talk now.
Okay. Yeah. Good evening, sir. Can you hear us?
Don, you may need to unmute your microphone. But you are unmuted.
Hi, yeah, my question is are they going to be using,
Ma'am, would you mind stating your name and address for the record, please?
yeah, Don Girocco, 388 Mitchell Drive. And my question is if the fire station ends up in Jobson near the park, are they going to be using Mitchell as a cut through? Because right now, many motorists are using Mitchell as a cut through. There's a stop sign by the park that people do not stop at. And if there's going to be fire station traffic through there, it can definitely get more dangerous than it currently is for residents with small children.
Thank you, Ms. Don.
I'm going to say no to that question, that we won't probably be using that unless we were having to go inside to that neighborhood. There is a traffic sign, as she mentioned, a stop sign on Mitchell, which just makes it a different avenue for us as far as at least trying to use the stop sign as far as slowing traffic down as well. So Mitchell wouldn't be one of our routes again, unless it was absolutely in the neighborhood.
Chief, wouldn't you say that you primarily use arterial roads before you use residential roads in making calls?
Absolutely. It's all about the timing factor. Going through neighborhoods is not beneficial when you have cars parked on the side of the road, kids in the neighborhoods, and that sort of thing. So we definitely try to get through the main roads first and then limit our routing through the neighborhoods.
Joseph, are there anyone else raising their hand?
There's no other hands raised at this time. Press *9 to raise your hand.
Are there anyone asking questions?
There are no more questions asked. Don reiterated one question, actually. Right now, many use Mitchell as a cut through and do not stop at stop signs. Will the fire station be used as a cut through?
I think Chief addressed that to the best ability of from where he's here. Okay, are there anyone else? Joseph?
There's no one else.
Okay, so I'm going to close the public comments. Council, are there additional discussions? So let me set the stage here. I think this is what staff is asking. So we need to discuss this, right? So I think this is right. That's it. Thank you, Chief. You may sit for a second. I may call you back if I need it. What? I'm sorry. What staff is asked? Oh, can you go back to the chart for me? Yeah, the staff is asking for 2 things, right? Council to select the preferred 1 or 2 locations. And if it is, and again, if you look at the rating criteria, That's a community involvement portion. So I'm assuming if the council's choice is between Glacier and Jobson, and since there is a community context to those two sites, perhaps we need a community involvement in the discussion. Either way, right? One or the other sides, right? So that's one. Go back one more time.
Which slide?
To the path forward. Yes, sir. Thank you. And obviously from there we go to this select, design, and procurement. I know there's going to be, I know the cost is already baked into the contract we have to come out to. I know Susan did some numbers for me. If the council chooses to go with the one, is that potential saving, or can we get the money back, or that's already spent? All right.
Sorry about that, and I apologize to the public. We're trying really hard to accommodate Zoom and social distancing and council here, so I apologize for our technical challenges today. So for every site that we do a more in-depth analysis, it's $8,800. The preliminary design for the selected site is $45,617. A geotech report for this selected site, $7,018, and a topographic survey for the selected site is $13,750. So in our original budget, what we had kind of costed out was that we would do up to two sites for site analysis. So we would spend the 17,000 on that, and then do only one site for the other three items.
Okay. So if the council choose to down select from 6 to maybe 5 sites to 2, then we are talking about from then going from 2 to 1 will cost us $1,800. That's really the difference. If the council feels strongly that they have one clear choice, then we say that much money. I'm just trying to set the stage here, right? That way we understand the direction, the path we need to take. So with that, I want to ask for a vote here, right? But let me ask you though, how strongly everyone feels that we need to go for 2 choice versus 1 choice? Is that a vote, Susan? Or that's a discussion? That's a discussion, right?
Whether you want 1 or 2 sites.
Yeah, so does anyone feels that we can limit to 1? Let's start with that. Let me go the conservative. Does anyone feel that we have the winner, we know which one to go, we just need 1? How many people feel so? Raymond, do you feel that too?
I mean, I think that there are 2 that stand out.
You want to go with the 2?
rest. Pardon me?
You want to go with the 2?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Eldridge? 2. I think Larry, 2 or 1. Okay. So sounds like we got 2, so that's great. So now we know the path forward. I agree with the 2, by the way. My arrows are clear. So now we know. Now I am going to ask for a vote. Right, so that's a vote, right? Is it not? Okay. So I think the concern act upon narrowing the selection for the long. So I'm going to ask for a vote here. I'm going to make a recommendation here. Can we just go 1 and 2 separate? Can we pick 1 and then go second, or you want to pick 1 and 2? Let's do 1 at a time.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
can we do a motion?
Yes.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to move forward on doing the site for the Jobson and the Glacier sites for the fire department.
I'll second that.
Okay, that's a motion made by Mr. Freeman and second by Clark to down select the sites to Glacier Track and Jobs. Everyone heard the motion. And again, if you don't agree with that choice, you can vote against and just make it. All in favor signify. All opposed? So, I'm assuming you voted against, right? I did, yeah. So motion passed 6.1, council will direct staff and the consultant to go do further site analysis on Glacier and Dock. Is that it?
State for the record who voted opposed.
Thank you very much. Voting in favor of the motion, Mr. Freeman, Mr. Allen, Mr. Finch, Mr. Clark, Mr. Egan, and George, and voting against Mr. Eldridge. That is, Rachel? So then I'm assuming, Susan, after that, we'll go through the public input since both are community involvement. We need to start setting up that.
Yes, sir.
So that will happen before we direct Les to go spend more money on one site, right?
We can do public involvement first if you'd like, or we can do those two analysis because there might be some information that we find out during that that could have bearing on the decision.
I think that's the way to do it. Let's go do the analysis first. Everybody agree? Then do the public comments. Is that good enough, Susan?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Les, thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate it. Now we'll go back to our regular agenda item, number 3. Discuss, consider, and act upon an interim use agreement between TruTex Contracting Solutions and the town of Sunnyvale. Mr. Jackson? Rashad Jackson.
Sir, Mayor, Council.
Good evening.
Evening. Staff received a request for an interim use agreement. We had an executive session at our last town council meeting in regards to this matter, where a draft was noted to be going to be presented today. The particular uses in question are a contractor shop and contractor storage yard. The use is existing and locating in a building at the rear building at 2505 North Beltline Road. The applicant, of course, would like to remain in the location. The matters of the agreement that are primarily up for discussion today is the renewability of the agreement. And that was highlighted in the draft that was submitted in the packet. Staff will leave the discussion up to council as to what direction we need to go to finalize this matter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson. I'm going to discuss something else.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that after the last discussion, I was in contact with Councilmember Egan, who I think had proposed one solution. So the way the contract or the agreement now reads is following the initial period, which was 5 years, the interim use may be continued for additional successive 5-year extension period. So that is kind of where it's written right now, but it can change. We just put in that language and we actually noted that there's not agreement on this term at this point.
Is that something we can discuss openly or we need to go deep?
You can discuss it openly or you can go to executive session under consultation with attorney.
Okay.
We do have the attorney online.
Council, let me ask you. I'm going to ask this question. If there's disagreement, I want to take it to the executive session. Okay, that's my question.
Mayor, I think we need to go to exec and discuss this. As I stated in the previous executive session concerning this, I've got a problem with the way this is written. And I think we can talk about it.
So can I have a motion to adjourn the executive session?
So move to adjourn.
Motion made by Mr. Egan. Can you have a second? Second. Second by Clark. Everyone heard the motion? Other additional discussions? All in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 7-0. Now time is 7:44 and we are in executive session. Okay, we hope to be out of this executive session very shortly. Hamilton. out of the executive session.
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time? I had the mic muted.
Yes, sir. Now time is 8:02. We are back in the regular session out of the executive session. Council, are there any discussions on this topic? If not, I'm going to open up for public comments. This is item number 3. If there are anyone from the members of the audience or anyone on calling through the Zoom wants to raise their hand, please do so at this time. No one is coming forward from the council chamber. Joseph, anyone
No
raise their
hand,
hand?
no hands raised.
No hands raised, so I'm going to close the public comment. Council, are there any additional discussions? Susan, I think there was a recommended, are there any recommended changes to the language, Susan?
Yes, sir. The council asked that we just clarify that we're on item 4 where it says following the initial period, the interim use may be continued for additional successive 5-year extension periods unless the council or staff bring forward a review. And then the other change is on number 5, 120 days is the amount of written notice that would be given to the tenant if there was cause to terminate the agreement.
Is there anything else about change of hands, or that's already captured somewhere?
Everything else is already captured, sir.
Council, that's the proposed language change. If no one has additional discussions or comments on this topic, can I have a motion with respect to item number 3 with the amended language?
Mayor, I'll make that motion to approve the item with the language as noted by the town manager.
Mr. Egan made the motion to approve item number 3 with the amended text. Seconded by Mr. Clark. Everyone heard the motion? Are there additional discussions? All in favor signify. All opposed. Motion passed 6-1. Supporting for the motion, Mr. Eldridge, Mr. Clark, Mr. Egan, Mr. Allen, Mr. Finch and George, and voting against Mr. Freeman. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on to item number 4, discuss, consider, and act upon a bid received for Creek Bank armoring under Barnesbridge Road in the amount of $1.425 million from CES contractor and authorize the town manager to execute a contract for the services. Town engineer, Mr. Jenkins, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Yes, this item is for the armoring bid that we solicited for putting slope protection underneath this bridge and where Barnesbridge Road crosses over Duck Creek. Just to briefly familiarize or re-over where we're on this, the bridge has been closed for a number of months due to safety concerns. We have already started the process of getting an arrangement with TxDOT to replace the bridge. However, that is a 3-year program, as y'all know. Y'all had directed me to send out for bids to armor underneath the bridge, which would allow this bridge to be reopened safely to traffic during that 3-year interim period. We'd sent out for bids. We received 1 bid from CES contractor in the amount of $1,425,000. Y'all had asked us to bring this back before you to allow you to discuss it and elect whether or not to proceed with this expenditure or as an alternative just to simply keep the bridge closed until such time as the bridge is replaced.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I'm going to take some public comments. Would you like to go sit down for a second? Now, like to be seated. I'm going to open up for public comments. If there are anyone from the members of the audience would like to speak to the council, please come forward. And also, if anyone who are calling in through the Zoom would like to join us or make comments, please raise your hands. Like to come forward, sir? Good evening, sir. Thanks for joining us. So when you're done here,
Wasn't planning on speaking, but thank you.
yes, so when you are done, there's a form to be filled in. It's basically capture your address and name. That
Yes,
you can
sir.
use that for records.
I wasn't planning on speaking, but thank you. For 70 years I've been around here, I've had to work. My point is, are they going to take the turn out of that bridge? That's the most dangerous part of that bridge for 50 years or more. As you go there, it does like that. And is it going to be widened? I forgot to tell you my name, Larry Brown, 585 North Collins. But my question is, they take that turn out of it like the old one? And are they going to widen it? Because I've seen equipment, animals, and people hit there. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
There are no one else from the members of the audience coming forward. Joseph, do you have anyone raising their hands?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, no hands raised. So I'm going to close the public comments. Mr. Jenkins, thanks for being back here. Council, I'm going to open up for public, I'm going to open up for council discussions on this topic. So there's a short-term plan and a long-term plan. Long-term plan, I think that is already part of the CEO, correct? That's already, we captured it. And since during the strategy planning session, I believe, this temporary armoring was brought up. And I remember some citizens talking about they got enough people who can come back and fix this at a relatively low cost. But I'm very surprised to hear there's only one person bid for this contract, in fact, in reality. So with that, I'm going to open up for council questions and discussions.
Mayor, I have a question.
Mr. Freeman?
Is any of that $1.4 million reimbursable through the other project we've signed up for?
No, sir, this would be strictly the town's expense.
That's my question. Thank you.
Mr. Eldridge?
Have we done any traffic studies on Barnes Bridge and have any kind of numbers around how many people go down it, up and down it before the closure, obviously?
Excuse me.
I mean, now it's zero.
There had not been any recent traffic studies. There had been traffic studies done as part of the general analysis of the town's road network, but they're several years old. I would certainly be able to report that back to you. I don't have those numbers just right at my fingertips.
Mr. Eldridge, what is your point?
I mean, $1.4 million is a lot of money to spend, right? And do we have how many homes on Barnes Bridge, residents? We have Tanner Creek, another 20.
I think there's about 45 to 50 driveways on Barnes Bridge. Tanner Creek, I think, is 28.
A lot of money to spend for 45 homes. They can also easily get around and go back another way, right?
Okay, understood your point, but it's also a regional connection, but with details. Council, other additional discussions on this topic?
I have one question with regards to Larry Brown, question that he just asked about the bend in that road, right at the entrance of the bridge. Can that be addressed and straightened out? Talking about the approach entry to the east of the bridge, can that be?
Once TxDOT gets into the detailed design, I mean, they're not going to widen it out to 4 lanes or anything like that. It's going to continue to be a 2-lane bridge. Their standard bridge is somewhat wider than what's out there now, and they would try to build a safer structure within the limits of what's out there. I would say there would be some room to work with them to try to improve safety, but that's something that would have to be addressed as part of the overall design of that bridge.
But this one is strictly for armoring and no such improvements. This one is strictly for armoring the bridge, and the straightening and widening is not part of this scope.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Council, additional discussions. So really, staff is looking for a direction, but this was a hot topic, and many felt that they need to go spend the money. And staff came back with a long-term solution, that is to work with the TxDOT. Town pays 10% and extra 90%. So that's really the direction staff is looking for. Mr. Egan, do you have any comment, or you didn't say? Mr. Clark?
So what's the time frame again? I know we did go over this, but just as a refresher, what's the time frame for TxDOT to come back and for us to go that route?
They have informed us it's a 3-year process. I think, and Susan, correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't think they've sent us the final advanced funding agreement. I know a draft has been presented and approved, but we're basically still waiting on the document to be officially signed. Once that is signed, then that 3-year clock would start to tick.
Right, okay. So this project right now to shore it up, strengthen the banks, could we open the bridge if we did this during those 2 or 3 years and before they actually start construction, maybe a year before they start construction?
Yes, sir, that's correct. Once this is done, and the estimated working time would be 60 working days from whenever we would kick them off to start, then the armor would be in place and we would be able to open the bridge safely so that they could at least use the bridge during that, whatever remains of that 3-year period at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Egan?
But Lyle, there's no guarantee on the part of the contractor that if we have significant rainfall, that armoring would not be washed out.
They are required as part of the contract to execute a 2-year maintenance bond. So we would have that 2-year guarantee from them.
So at least we have 2 years worth. And then probably part of that might be court cost if it gets completely washed away, so that they've got to start from scratch, because that's going to be a start from scratch if that does happen. But that's only for a period of 2 years too.
That's correct, yes, sir.
I just want to comment here, and I've spoken with a lot of people up in Dunbarton's Bridge, not all of them. There are concerns. I'll hold that for later. This is comment time and question and answer with Lyle.
Council, additional discussions on this topic? Council, I'm going to give you my thoughts. Again, this is just one person's opinion, right? I'm sorry? You do have some thoughts? Okay, Mr. Egan, serious.
I was under the assumption that we were doing Q&A with staff more than anything. To start back where I was, I've talked with I've emailed a lot of our residents up and down Barnes Bridge. And of course, living on Barnes Bridge, I know what, and having been there for so long, kind of know where all the wants and wherefores are. And I totally understand the gentleman's concern with the dog legs that are at both approaches to the bridge, because they are very dangerous. I'm surprised we haven't lost a lot of more bicycle riders. Maybe there might be some down the creek. We just haven't found them. But it's a difficult decision. It's a hard one. But knowing what this town is facing, what we do know that we're facing over the next 3 years, and that's probably overshadowed by what we don't know that we're facing in terms of money. That, I'm all for doing the things that we need to do infrastructure wise, but this is one that's tough. The majority of the people that I have spoken with, and I've spoken with 2 or 3 that want it armored and open, they want us to spend the money. But the majority of the rest, which I would say we're between 10 and 12 residents, they're wanting us to be better stewards of the money. And that's comment coming from not the 1.5 million, but when we were talking in the $300,000 to $400,000 range, they were saying, we don't really think we want to spend even that much. So when you hit the 1.5, I think we've reached the straw that broke the camel's back at this stage. I totally understand the flow through. If this were a bridge that were on Collins, if this were a bridge that were on Tripp, this were a bridge that maybe even was on Town East, I would totally agree with it. That maybe we need to do it because the amount of traffic leading to Mr. Eldridge's question about traffic impact or what the traffic studies are, other than the high-speed motorcycles and the hot rodders that like to get out onto Barnes Bridge. we've only got about 90 driveways, which turns into about 180 cars, at least of our residents. And the rest of them is all flow through traffic. I hate to push whatever that additional traffic is over onto Town East, but that's the way I think it is, especially considering the fact that it's a lot of money that basically is going to go down the creek, whether we spend it today and get a 2-year warranty out of it, and if it hopefully lasts 3 years, all of that work is still money that's down the creek. And with that, I'll give it back to you, Mayor.
This is a difficult call because thank goodness we don't build streets just for our residents. I mean, it's a regional street. I think we have a regional responsibility, just like other cities do. I understand the residents not wanting traffic on that road. I get that. But we don't build roads for regional use. But in this case, I do agree, Mark's comments on where we are financially. Spending $1.5 million for a few years is not, in my opinion, good stewardship at this point. As much as I'd like to have it open, I cannot in my head justify the $1.5 million, knowing we have a solution down the road. I am nervous about the fact that the state's telling us 2 to 3 years or 4 to 5 years. I don't trust their timing. So that is one thing that I think we may have to readdress. If this is not done in a couple of years, we may be right back here again talking about this again with on a shoestring that the state may do something. They're facing the same thing we are or about to with funding. And so sales tax gone down. So I'm nervous about that, and I openly say I'm nervous about it. And that's the one thing that I don't like about this plan is we're having to rely on somebody else to fund it for us. But having said that, I cannot support. I cannot support it.
Mr. Clark?
I agree with my colleagues. It's tough to spend $1 million+ just for potentially 2 years. My question to you, Lyle, is if we don't do anything with it, actually, do we need to do anything with it for it to at least remain viable to actually have a bridge built there later? Or will the whole thing collapse in 2 years, 3 years? I think you were talking about some type of pipe that goes through there that may need to be replaced. Is there any type, if we decide not to do this, is there any type of work that we need to put in there anyway, just to make sure that it's a spot where it can be repaired or rebuilt later?
Well, our Public Works Department is continuing to go out there on a regular basis, check on the bridge, because the erosion is continuing. And they are doing what they can to shore up the bridge because there is a town water line that's attached to that bridge. Obviously, that's a concern. We need to make sure that that water line is protected. So we are continuing to do that. While the bridge would not be safe for people to use to drive over because of all the heavy loading that hits those bridges, we can at least keep the bridge there until such time as we replace it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I comment to that too, Lyle, just to expand a little bit from the previous meeting that we had? It was brought up by our Public Works Director that if the bridge were to wash out, in all likelihood, we would lose that main line. However, that line is a loop line going down Barnes Bridge, and there are cutoff valves on either side of the creek. Now, loops work well. Those of y'all who've been around this a little while, loops work well because it keeps constant flowing of water, not necessarily in one direction or the other, but it prevents stagnation of water, which decreases your chlorine levels, your chlorine residuals in the water line. What would happen, and you may recall on the night that we discussed this, there was some suggestion that maybe we bored underneath the creek. If the pipe were to go out, we turn off the valves, we bore underneath the creek, put a new piece of pipe in, reconnect it back up to the valves and get the loop going again. Well, that's quite expensive. And in fact, I even made the comment that particular night, I think it was $400,000 was a swag that we gave, that Brian was able to give us that night. We can waste a whole lot of water for $400 and that, or $400,000. That comment stems from the fact of, in order to make sure that we maintain chlorine residuals in the now in-capped water lines, the town has to go out on occasion and bleed water out of fire hydrants. And that's wasted water on the ground. In this day and age where we're trying to conserve water, it's not a good idea to do that. But we also have to put things that are not good ideas to do into economic terms. And just, it's the waiting game of whether or not the bridge gets washed out, which takes out the main line, which causes us to close things off, which then says we're wasting water while we're deciding, and staff would have to come back to council at that stage if that were to happen. And it were to happen before the new bridge is built, then the staff would have to come back to us and say, okay, we really need to remake this connection. But when they remake that connection, it's not just boring underneath. We'd like to use the new bridge structure to support the line, which is a lot cheaper than boring underneath the creek. So now there's this possibility that this could come back to us sometime between now and the time the bridge is built, because the water line got washed out. But I think we just have to wrestle that snake when it gets here. We not worry about it and just hope that the bridge holds with what limited work that we can do on it by town staff.
Lyle, thanks. I have a question for you. If we shore this up at 1.4 million, what's the expected life of the bridge if we do that?
Well, even if we do, even if we do this armoring, the bridge is still 70 years old. It was built in 1950. Traffic has increased on that bridge, both in number of cars and the weight of cars. The bridge is just structurally not safe as a regional route. And as the area continues to grow, those trends of increased traffic are just going to continue to go up.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I get all that. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I got a second point to that. How long can we expect that bridge to work if we were spending money and shore it up? Because part two to that is, to Mr. Finch's point, if the county recants the money and now we're 8, 9, 10 years without them being able to help us, can the bridge last that long if we shore it up? That's part one. And part two is, do we have any assurance that they're going to do this in 3 years? So now we have a 7-year period for no bridge.
Well, to take your first point, sir, based on the most recent bridge inspection report that we got from TxDOT, which was done a little over a year ago before we had the major erosion that caused us to close it down, the bridge appeared to be in, I want to say, relatively decent shape for its age. So, it's a little bit hard to pin an exact time frame on how long the bridge would last with the armoring. I would think at least 10 years would not be unreasonable. But again, if, a large development goes in, maybe not necessarily in Sunnyvale, but near Sunnyvale, that really increases that traffic, it's a little bit tough to say. I think 10 years is probably a realistic time frame.
So then part two of that question is, do we expect the county to really fulfill, based on all the changes, to be able to get this done in 3 years?
Once we get this advanced funding agreement with TxDOT, they've repeatedly assured both myself and other staff that the 3 years is, they're standing behind it.
Hey, thanks, I appreciate it. That's what I want to get at.
So when do we get the advanced funding agreement signed?
At this point, again, Susan, please correct me if I'm wrong. We're really just waiting on the TxDOT staff over in Mesquite to send us the final document that allows us to sign it electronically. It's already presented to y'all at a previous meeting. Y'all indicated approval on it. It may come in tomorrow. I expect it to come in fairly soon. And once it comes in, we just simply sign it and that's it.
I'm assuming if this get delayed or staff has indication that this is not going to happen 3 years, staff will be getting back with the council to let us know.
Yes, sir. We'll be continuing to work with TxDOT once this thing gets signed and make sure that we stay on schedule.
Are there additional discussions on this topic? If there are none, I'm going to call for a motion with respect to item number 4. I'm sorry? I didn't take public comments. My apologies and thank you for,
I don't see any.
I
hands raised at
think
this
I
time.
took comments. Remember, the gentleman from the back came and talked to us, right? But thank you, though. It's always, good to have the check and balance. Thank you, Lyle. With that, can I have a motion with respect to item number 4?
Mayor, I make a motion that we do not move forward with this bid to shore up the Barnes Bridge Bridge.
Is that a good enough motion? Rachel, is that clarifies technically? Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. Deacon?
I'll
Motion-
second.
I'm sorry? Mark, I just want to make sure that we get the language correct. That's really what I'm trying to do.
We do need to include in the motion that we reject all bids.
Okay. Can you state the motion the
Yeah.
way you think it's
Yeah.
technically correct?
I think it's sufficient to just say that we're voting to, we make a motion to reject all bids submitted for this project and direct staff to not move forward with the armory.
Let me try to make the motion for you.
So moved as described by the town manager.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Egan to reject item number 4 and to reject all the proposals associated with this bid, with this item, and director staff not to proceed with this project. For a second. Second by Mr. Finch. Everyone heard the motion? Any additional discussion? All in favor signify. All opposed? I'm sorry, I'm in favor. All opposed, motion passed 7-0. Susan, thank you for the language. Mark, thanks for understanding.
Thank you, Lyle and staff, for the work.
Moving on to item number 5, discuss, consider, and act upon an engineering design proposal from Schoenberg and Park Incorporated in the amount of $178,760 for the trip, jobs, and drainage improvement CIP, and authorize the town manager to execute the contract. Mr. Jenkins? Good evening one more time.
Yes, sir. Good evening again. When the Capital Improvement Project Committee met last year, during the same process that led them to highly rank the fire department, which was discussed earlier this evening, there were a number of drainage projects that were also ranked very high, although not as high as the fire department. And so we have sent out RFQs to a number of consultants for several different projects. This first one that I'm bringing for you tonight has been named by us the Trip Jobson Drainage Improvements. It's actually 2 small projects that for ease of administration and design, we've basically lumped together into a single project. The first part of this is a design of a new box culvert to replace the existing culvert under Trip Road. As I said, approximately 1,500 feet west of Collins. This culvert is, according to the stormwater study that was done by Friesen Nichols in late 2018, that culvert is undersized for a 100-year storm event. And so thus we have requested a proposal to design a larger structure with an increased flood carrying capacity. So that is the first project. And the second project is, we've been calling the second project a Jobson Road Wetlands Bypass. What this is, as I'm sure y'all know, when you drive up north along Jobson Road, kind of on the west side near the homestead, there's a small concrete drainage collection facility that in the time I've been here, I've never driven by and it wasn't at least half full of water all the time. And it also backs up into the storm sewer system that serves the homestead. This, number one, is a potential mosquito breeding area. It's also unsightly, and it reduces the stormwater capacity of those pipes in the homestead so that when we have large flood events, those pipes can't carry the water that they're really designed to carry. When Friesen Nichols did that 2018 stormwater study, I had asked them to include a small bypass pipeline that would essentially be an additional drain for this. It would go underneath Jobson Road, skirt the edge of the existing wetlands. It's on the south side, or the downstream side of Jobson. This would enable us to drain that area without having to run the risk of violating the Corps of Engineers protection requirements for that wetlands area down there. It would only be a fairly small pipe. you know, if that pond was full of water, it would drain that area out in probably about an hour or two. So I mean, it's not a, there's still gonna be water backed up during rain events, but it would then drain out once the rain event is complete. So those two projects combined together, we had this proposal from Schaumburg and Polk in the amount of $178,760. And with that having been said, I would be happy to take any questions y'all may have.
Let me take public comments. I'll come back to her. We're going to open up for public comments. Is there anyone from the members of the audience who would like to speak to the council? Please come forward. Or if anyone calling in through the Zoom would like to raise their hand, and you'll be recognized. No one is coming forward from the audience. Joseph,
No
are there
hands
anyone
raised.
raising their hand?
No hands raised.
No hands are raised, so I'm going to close the public comments. I like question for you. The pond at the intersection of Stony Creek and Jobson, the one you're talking about.
Small little concrete
Yes,
pond?
yes.
Sir.
And you said you could take a drain pipe underneath Jobson, and where do they dump that water?
That would skirt the edge of the wetlands that's on the south side, excuse me, the east side of Jobson downstream. And then it would come out near, if you go on Stony Creek Boulevard, there's a large box culvert structure that you drive over as soon as you exit off of Jobson. It would come out at some point right there at that culvert. So again, it bypasses all that wetlands area and it drains back out into that culvert, which has already been improved as part of the development of those phases of Stony Creek.
And that goes out to the glacier?
Right, that area does eventually drain into the Glazer Pond. As I say, the intent at this point is to design something like about an 8-inch pipe, just a very small little overflow pipe. So the amount of overall water in that stream would not be significantly impacted.
It's not going to mess up the property on the east side of Jobson, right? It's not just going to drain to the upper line, but it's going into the culvert.
It'll end up draining into the culvert eventually, yes, sir. It would not be going on any residential lots or anything like that. It would just strictly be on that wetlands area.
Thank you, Mr. Chief. Council question for staff.
And I'll let me make sure I've got a picture of this in my mind. The picture I've got in my mind is right. This is going to drain that standing water that's on the west side of Jobson
Yes, so the little concrete pond.
only and so will it be dry now or will it always maintain that level? Because I thought that was part of the wetlands.
I know the little concrete area is not part of the wetlands. As I say, when it is actually raining, there'll be water that stands in it. The pond, it won't be so large of a pipe that it'll drain out immediately.
Right.
And as soon as the rain event is over, it should drain out within, an hour or two.
But it'll bring that dry.
That's correct, yes. So the pond, it would be dry once the draining is done.
Okay, so, and the reason why my comment, I thought that was part of the wetlands is I thought you had to keep the water levels in a wetland area if it was already designated as a wetland area.
Well, we won't be impacting the wetlands area that's on the downstream side. That little concrete bath, I hate to say concrete bathtub, that little small
Cement
concrete-
pond, yeah.
Yeah, cement pond. That pond itself is not wetland.
Oh, okay, all right. So you're just draining it during rain events, okay.
Correct, yes, sir.
Yeah, I just talked differently in the past, but I think live clarified that. Council, other additional discussions on this topic? If there are none, I'm going to call for a motion with respect to item number 5.
Mayor, I make a motion to approve item number 5 as presented.
Motion made by Mr. Egan, seconded by Mr. Finch to approve item number 5 as presented. Everyone heard the motion? Are there additional discussions? If there are none, all in favor signify. All opposed? Motion passed 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Since everybody's proud, I had to kind of take time to look around. That's why by the time you guys are done. Moving on to item number 6, discuss, consider, and act upon an engineering design services proposal in the amount of $518,810 from Walter P. Moore for the East Strip Drainage Improvements Project and authorize the town manager to execute the contract.
Yes, sir. This is another one of the drainage projects that was identified last year by the CIP committee. This, just to briefly summarize kind of where this is at, this is Trip Road east of Collins. essentially from roughly where the Sunnyvale ISD campus is, heading east about to East Fork Road. That area, as y'all know, is open channel, rural road section. The area drains poorly. And Freeze and Nichols, when they did their stormwater study, again, they identified this area as something that was in need of improvements. Basically, what happens is whenever we have a very large event, that because the water cannot drain to the natural outlet where it should be going to quickly enough, if we had a big enough water rainfall, the water would then spill out of the Trip Road right away, drain overland and cause flooding problems for some of the residential homes on the south side of Trip Road. So obviously the idea is to do the improvements in Trip, maintaining the rural road section, but basically allowing that area to drain better. Another facet of this particular project is there had been some concern expressed about the fact that right now there essentially is very limited pedestrian mobility along Trip Road, which poses a hazard. We have a lot of residences in that area that need to access the SISD campus. So one of the things we've added to this project is putting a sidewalk on the north side of Trip Road. Because the sidewalk is going to go in, there's going to have to be some amount of storm sewer put in to enclose a certain portion of the existing ditch so that we can get the sidewalk in properly. So all that's been incorporated into this design contract. As I say, Walter P. Moore has submitted a proposal in the amount of $518,810. The estimated design time is, as I stated down here, approximately 240 working days, which translates roughly into 1 calendar year. All that having been said, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
So these were just for design costs, and you had to come back for the construction costs made.
That is correct. Yes, sir. It'll have to be bid out once the design is complete.
We're going to open up for council and the public comments. Is there anyone from the members of the audience or those who called in through Zoom like to speak to the council? Either come forward or raise your hand. No one from the members of the audience is coming forward, so I'm going to ask for anyone raise their hand.
No one has raised their hand.
No hands are raised, so I'm going to close the public comments. Council questions for Mr. Jenkins, Mr. Clark.
So I'm definitely in favor of this project. I'm excited to see, potentially us putting a sidewalk in on the north side. That'll help the residents a lot. This cost is $500, $500,000 to plan it. Is that
engineering?
It'd be the full
Cost?
engineering design and then bid and construction phase services.
That's the $37,000 for the construction administration. But other than that,
Okay. At some point, I think we had thrown out the idea to maybe get help. Is this something we could keep internal? Get more staff to do? Could this be used to help get more staff and to do the work internally, the planning? I'm just throwing out ideas here.
how much time you have? That's the question.
And this may be a much deeper conversation.
If I was going to do it myself internally, it's not that I couldn't do it, but we could get it designed in a much more cost-effective fashion if it was done by an outside agency, given current staffing capabilities.
Say that one more time, I missed it. I thought it just kind of circled around, so maybe I didn't hear right.
I mean, if you're asking if the design could be done just using strictly internal Sunnyvale staff, I mean, the answer is yes, it could be designed. However, just with resources being what they are, it would take a significantly longer time in order to get it designed and built properly.
In other words, it's a good idea, but might not be a short-term
Right,
solution.
scalability, we don't
Right.
have.
It's something which the solution is to consider in the long term. Anything else, Mr. Clark?
Nope, that's it.
Mr. Egan?
Lyle, does this fit into the projections of preliminary cost estimate projections that I'm sure there was a big number that the CIP committee came up with. Does this fit within the parameters of that?
Yes, sir, it does. And the reason I say that is there was a cost estimate done of construction that Freeze and Nichols did. As I mentioned to you before, this was one of the projects that was identified by them in the 2018 stormwater study. And this does fit in with what one would normally expect engineering for the project at that cost to be.
Mr. Freeman? How far are we talking about having a sidewalk go up? To which streets?
The approximate estimate right now is where Shelby Lane intersects Trip Road currently. We would basically start there, run it west, basically tie into where, when the Collins roundabout project is finished, there's going to be a short stretch of sidewalk that gets put in on Trip. With that, basically we would blend those together so you'd have an uninterrupted course of sidewalk from Shelby Lane west to Collins. That is the newer phase of Stony Creek 5B. It's like, I believe it's like right opposite where Pascal Road heads south. Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. Part of my understanding with the whole rails to trails with that one section going back there is that they could also connect that to all of the different, so from not just the new section of Stony Creek, but also to Robin Ridge, also to possibly Duck Creek, just basically directly through. So we're only looking at taking it from, Salt Collins to that first new development just past the admin building.
Yes, sir, that's correct. And the consultant is aware of the Rails to Trails project. So, because this stretch would cross where that Rails to Trails would cross Trip, there'll be provision for, trying to plan ahead for a sidewalk intersection whenever that part of the Rails to Trails is constructed.
And how far does the drainage go?
Basically back to East Fork Road. So the drainage is going to go quite a bit
So
further out.
the
than
drainage
sidewalk.
goes out.
That Mr. Freeman?
Yeah, that is it.
Additional questions or discussions? Or comments?
I will have one comment. Lyle, thank you for all the work you did on that for me. I know I had a question on that, so I appreciate all your background work you did on that, so thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Okay, if there are now other discussions, can I have a motion with respect to item number 66?
Motion to approve item 6 as presented.
Motion made by Mr. Finch to approve item number 6 as presented.
Second.
Second by Mr. Allen. Everyone heard the motion? Are there additional discussions? If none, all in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 7-0. Lyle, again, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Moving on to item number 7, discuss, consider, and act upon first reading of ordinance 20-13 and ordinance of the town of Sunnyvale, Texas, adding chapter 4.5, emergency services, adding article 4.5.100, and adding article 4.5.200 to the code of ordinances related to the definitions, imposition of 911 service fees, execution of contracts with the 911 service providers, restrictions and limitations on 911 service fees, providing for reliable access to 911 emergency services, compliance with the state regulation, providing for savings, severability, and setting an effective date. Ms. Capri?
Mayor and Council. On July 22nd, the town council voted unanimously to pass an ordinance to establish its own police department. And since that date, we've been on quite the journey to get us there. This is just one more step in establishing the police department and getting our dispatch and 911 services rerouted. We actually last week, it was voted on by the what's the name? CSEC. Thank you. Sorry about that. Voted on by CSEC to establish us as our own 911 entity. And now our next step tomorrow would be to send out contracts to all of the service providers to contract with us so that the actual line will change to go to Seagoville on our behalf. And then also so that our 911 tax dollars will come to the town, and then we can use those to contract with the COG, NCT 911, and with the town of Seagoville for our dispatch services. So what this ordinance does is it allows us to now receive our 911 funds that have previously gone to Dallas County for the last 33 years. So I had reached out to a couple of council members to talk about what that fee might be. And I think in the end, I went with the fee that our closest neighbor charges, which is 75 cents for residential, 75 cents for business, and 75 cents for trunk line. I'm open to other suggestions. I think any of the numbers probably make sense because what we're paying Seagoville for dispatch, and the first 50 cents of this fee will likely go to NCT 911. That contract will be heard the first week of June by the COGS. So we'll know more about that, but that was what we were told preliminarily.
Okay, thank you, Susan. I'm going to open up for public comments. If there anyone from the members of the audience would like to speak to the council on item number 7, please come forward or raise your hand in Zoom. No one is coming forward. Joseph, did anyone raise their hand?
No raised hands at this time.
No hands are raised, so I'm going to close the public comments. Susan, I know staff worked a whole lot of time and effort into getting us where we are, and we appreciate staff for the work you're doing. The question again is, I think the very first question was, the expense wise, are we going to break even? Because we said 50 cents will go to.
Right, 50 cents goes to NCT 911. They're a little complicated to explain, but they're kind of who does the routing. And so we have to have a contract with them because Seagoville is also contracted with them. So we're going to contract with them. We're also contracted with Seagoville. So I don't believe that we'll have any direct expenses that we pay to the NCT 911, but the first 50 cents of this money will go to them. So, whatever is above the first 50 cents would actually come into us as revenue stream that we could then use to help pay for our contractors.
Again, I know why you got 75. Got it. You looked at around and you picked the number which other neighboring cities. I was just wondering if there's any of the better science or better math behind it.
No,
I understand you're trying to walk through many issues. I got it.
Right. I did look at what was previously, I have a chart here of kind of what everyone's charging and tried to look at, some just charge the 50 cents across the board. I mean, it really is all over the place.
What's
Dallas.
the time frame? What's the 50 cent? What's the
Monthly.
time frame?
Monthly.
That's a monthly or per billing cycle?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're probably talking, just depending on what we charge, of what we'll reap and would be like $12,000, just depending on what we charge. So it's not a significant amount of money, but it's money. And right now, Dallas charges 62 cents, $1.50, and $2.40. So, there's a kind of a staggered charge. And again, I wish I could have a better reason for why I picked what I picked. I just really looked at our closest neighbor, felt like it was kind of even and fair and wasn't anything dramatic change for our residents and businesses.
Second part, I know you said you're going to notify the different carriers so that they can reroute the 911 calls to Seagoville. Is that, we put a future date, October 1 or whatever it is, that
Yes, sir.
everybody switches same time instantaneous?
Um,
There won't
we-
be any drop, right? I'm saying.
Yeah, we've been working on our contracts for the last 3 months. Craig's on the line. I want to give a shout out to him with our attorney's office. He's done a lot of work with me in conjunction with NCT 911 to get our contracts correct. And Erica on our staff has gone through just tons and tons of records to try to identify all the companies that provide services in Sunnyvale. You'd be surprised how many they are. All of you people who have like a phone through your computer, that's a company. So it's a ton of companies. And what we gave them in the contract was 90 days in which to make the change effectively. So we're hitting our timeline to be up and running. I think that would put it at September 1st.
Okay, there's no blackout in between. That means calls not going to either of the entities won't happen, right?
Yes,
It's
sir.
definitely going to one place.
And there's testing protocols that are outlined in the contract.
Since you haven't done in 30 years, that's why I asked the question, right? Council, question for staff on this topic.
Mayor, I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Susan, are our residents paying a fee now under the Dallas County,
Yeah, we believe so.
but we don't know?
Well,
Okay, I didn't mean it like
you
that.
may have seen on Facebook me asking to see people's phone bills to try to ascertain. Very difficult to see, but we believe so. But I can't guarantee it. I don't have a home phone.
Yeah, me either.
Alan, I looked at I don't have a home phone. I have a voice IP thing. I pay 3 or 4 different 911 charges.
You know what those rates are? I'm just curious.
75 cents, 250. Again, I paid to, and I think I sent that to Chief the other day. That's what 3 or 4 charges.
I've got 3 different carriers and it's virtually unidentifiable between the 3 different carriers, how much they're charging you.
So a resident's already paying a fee now. They'll just pay a different fee that'll come to us and we'll distribute it appropriately.
Yes, sir.
Thank
And,
you.
and the wireless fees actually go straight to the state and then they're dispersed back to us. It's a different system and we don't have a contract for those. And the contract's with the state and we actually got our first payment this last week.
Susan, those 3 numbers that you were giving, whether it was 75, 75, 75, or 62, a dollar, whatever, and a dollar, 2 something, is that the cumulative total of what the monthly billing is going to be? Or is that,
For us,
but it's cumulative? Like the 375s would have been 2 1/4 that the resident would see?
oh no, each one, the first 75 is a residential line. The second 75 is a business line and the third 75 is a trunk line. So just depending
Oh,
on
okay,
what they
okay.
have, what they would.
So in Dallas, it was 62 for the residential and a dollar something for the commercial and
240.
240 for the, okay.
Is this a fee we can monitor and modify once we know a little bit more about what we don't know?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
We
thank-
would just have to send them a modified fee schedule.
Okay, thank you.
I have a county 911 fee. I have a state 911 equalization fee and something else. 3 at least. Okay. Council, other additional discussions or questions on this? If there are none, I think I took public comments, right? Okay. If there are none, can I have a motion with respect to item number 7?
Motion to approve item number 7 as presented.
Motion made by Mr. Freeman to approve item number 7 as presented. Second by Mr. Egan. Everyone heard the motion? Are there additional discussions? All in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 7-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on to item number 8. Discuss, consider, and act upon an interlocal agreement with the city of Seagoville for surplus body armor and authorize the town manager to execute the contract. Chief? Are you on the line, sir?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I apologize in advance for my audio. I'm having trouble with it.
You're good.
We have, every time we hire an officer, we have to measure them for a vest. As you know, you approved the vest purchase about 3 months ago, and it's taking 125 days plus to get those vests in. And if you do that math, we're not going to have those vests in time by October 1st. Seagoville has generously offered to donate 4 or 5 of theirs that they're not using, and along with another pile of vests we've compromised from some various chief friends of mine. We'll have a surplus amount of vests that we can, at least as we hire people and get them measured, they can try these vests on. If they don't have one, they can bring with them until our vests come in. So it's a temporary solution.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to open up for public comments. If anyone from the members of the audience would like to speak to the council on this topic, please come forward or raise your hand. No one is coming forward. Joseph, anyone raising their hand?
No hands raised.
No hands raised. We're going to proceed public comments. Council question for Chief. Mr. Allen?
My only question is why do we have to vote on this? It seems like something they could just do.
In our,
ILA has to be approved by the
yeah,
council.
in our local agreements, we have to bring to council.
Okay, thank you.
That is one coming later. Somebody's giving us money, but we still have to. That's later. Go ahead. Mr. Finch?
Hey, Chief, what's the shelf life of body armor? Is it? I know
It just
it's for the year.
until you talk to, if you talk to the manufacturer, they recommend, I think, 5 to 7 years. So, you know, you'll keep continually ordering vests. So they do put a shelf life on them. I can tell you from experience that I've taken several vests that were 25 years plus out to the gun range before, and they've held up.
Are there additional questions for Chief?
Chief, I have a question, and this is just more for my knowledge. Is this kind of like, you know, if this actually gets used, if someone actually shoots these vests, at that point, that vest is gone? You have to order a new vest for this person, or can they be used over and over again?
No, they can't be used once they've been fired upon.
All right, thank you.
Additional questions? Okay, if there are none, I'm going to call for a motion on item number 8.
Motion to accept item 8 as presented.
Motion made by
Second.
Mr. Allen, second by Mr. Egan to approve item number 8 as presented. Everyone heard the motion? Are there additional discussions? If there are none, all in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 7-0. Chief, thank you very much for working this. Moving on to item number 9, discuss, consider, and act upon an interlocal agreement between the town of Sunnyvale and Dallas County providing funding for COVID-19 response activities. Ms. Guthrie?
Yes, sir. We all have been hearing about the CARES Act and the funding that was coming to municipalities from the federal government. Depending upon the size of the community, depended upon how that money flowed to the municipality. In our case, our funds flowed through Dallas County. And we now have an opportunity to enter into this interlocal agreement, which allows us to draw upon that money. There is one change to your cover sheet. Initially, we were told that we would be eligible for a total of $306,900, but it was based upon some old population numbers. And since then, that has been updated, and our total amount that we're eligible to apply for is $376,255. So the way this program works is the initial 20% will be sent to us, and then we have to provide receipts and records to document that those funds were used for COVID response. And then the additional funds, we will present a plan of action of how we would propose to spend them. And then they would give us approval, and then we could move forward with those programs. So I do have a subcommittee of staff that we've put together to assess both our current expenditures, what we've incurred, what within that are eligible, and then also what future expenses we might consider. And we're working on that and would only draw down funds that we feel are really necessary to move forward to responding to the COVID situation. Happy to answer any questions.
You can open for public comments. If anyone from the members of the audience would like to speak to the council, or talk to us through the Zoom, please come forward or raise your hand. No one is coming forward, so I'm going to close the public. We'll ask for anyone raising their hand.
No hands raised.
No hands raised, nobody coming forward, so I'm going to close the public comments. Council, are there any discussions on this topic? Mr. Allen?
Mayor, I have a question real quick for Susan. $370,000, is that right? They're going to give us 20% that we have to apply for the other. Assuming Dallas County does not approve our additional request, who keeps that money?
I'm gonna assume Dallas County, but I would hate to answer on their behalf.
So again, I don't know exact answer, but I was on a call with the governor. There are a couple of different buckets of money that talked to you about. Again, he was very clear. Even Jenkins was very clear. There are very strong clawback. Oh, so this is a federal money, basically. There are very strong clawback. They can come back and ask you to give the money back for a while.
So my question is, this is federal money that we're been given to the county, that the county gives to us if we apply. If we don't apply, then that money stays with Dallas County and does not go back to the feds.
Again, here I'm interpreting, right? Because in this a strong clawback, I don't think county can keep it. But that's not a fact because of very often.
I just want us to get all the money that we're entitled to and not let it sit with Dallas County. That's really my point to the whole conversation and clarity.
Yeah, we want it too. So, mayor's correct in the part where if we don't spend that money, it goes back to them. The thing about Dallas County being in this formula is because our emergency management plan and everything is operating under Dallas County. If we were our separate town or city, we have our own plan and everything, then it would go directly, still goes to Dallas County, but it goes to those cities just like it's doing now. It's just more direct when you're not having to go through Dallas County.
So I don't know what the federal clawback is. My guess it would be, if I was to make a guess based upon the conversations I've heard, is that they would have to have eligible expenses that would apply. Otherwise, it could be clawed back up to the feds, would be my guess, just like if we don't use it.
Governor was very clear that, remember, guys, this is very, very strict.
And they did give us, I put in the cover sheet, a guidance document to guide how we spend it so we know what's allowed, what isn't. And, as we kind of make some determinations about what programs we'd like to apply for, we would bring that back to you to get feedback from you all. But, some of the initial things that we're discussing are things like a plexiglass barrier in the library to protect those staff members, a sanitizing equipment, because right now we're having to borrow it from SISD. We could also, other things that have been discussed are expanding or extending business incentives so that the money flows into our local community, making sure that we have adequate PPP in case we have, further incidents of this and that we're prepared for this fall. So those were some of the preliminary discussions in addition to the overtime from the fire department that we already encountered, plus, like all of the AV things that we've had to do to accommodate the pandemic. So there's a lot of expenses that we've incurred already, but there's also programs we're looking for the future.
Additional questions on this one? Again, this is another year, somebody's giving us money, but we have to prove it. Gotcha. My understanding is go back to fact from what I interpreted. I didn't ask the question directly. Very good. Happy to ask. Okay. Any other questions or discussions? If not, can I have a motion with respect to item number 9?
Motion to approve item number 9 as presented.
Motion made by Mr. Freeman to approve item number 9 as presented.
Second.
Second by Mr. Clark. Everyone heard the motion? Are there additional discussions? If not, all in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 7-0. Council, we already covered 10, unless somebody wants to go back and start all over again. If not, item number 11, discuss, consider, and act upon the status and next step related to the town of Sunnyvale's annual Sunnyvale Sunnyfest. Ms. Guthrie?
I think Burton is on the line.
Burton, how are you, sir? Good evening. Burton Bar.
Is Burton? Thank you.
Is there, Burton? Let me unmute your mic for you.
Can you all hear me now?
Sorry about that. Good evening, Bar.
Hey, good evening. Basically, we're in a situation in terms of Sunnyfest, where we've got some deadlines coming up, in terms of some of the deposits that we've put down. We have, June the 1st for the fireworks is our last day to reschedule. The vendor would need to know, if we intend to reschedule, if we intend to have it on the 3rd as planned. Our reschedule date right now is October the 6th. They also offered to completely reschedule for July 2021, rolling the deposit. Fireworks vendor did indicate there may be a 10 to 20% price increase next year. So rolling the deposit would lock in that pricing for next year's show at our current price. Stage, sound, and lighting, June 3rd is our last day to cancel or reschedule for a refund of $1,250. And the inflatables and the entertainment, the Moles have graciously agreed to sponsor that again this year. The vendor has said the last day to cancel or reschedule is June the 19th. Additionally, the vendor has indicated they're still trying to assess if they're going to be able to operate under the current recommended social distancing and disinfecting guidelines. And our band, June 19th was the last day to cancel or reschedule. So with all that being said, we still have for fireworks, stage, sound, lighting, and the band, we have about $6,250 remaining in our special events budget. And that amount would finish paying the remaining balances for the deposits we've already paid for. However, it does leave approximately $5,950 of costs that are currently unfunded, and historically those would be funded by sponsorships throughout the community. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. I'm going to open up for public comments. Ms. Guthrie?
Mayor, can I just add?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if it was clear, but October 6th, which is, we picked that date months ago as our backup date. The reason we picked that date is it's National Night Out, and we already do a big public event on National Night Out. So I just wanted you to know that randomness of October 6th is actually, and remember, we're going to be opening our police department right before that. So Andrew's texting me, oh my gosh, we can do both together. I'm like, yep.
Got it. Thank you. So I'm going to open for public comments, but this is really the bottom line, right? Council needs to think through when we come back. Number one, do we want to hold Sunnyfest this year, yes or no? If yes, to what extent? Do we need fireworks? Do we need the chamber houses, the whole celebration? And obviously there's cost involved. If you cancel, postpone, there is different cost. Or do we do fireworks alone, social distancing alone? This is what we need to discuss when we come back. Let's just move to the public comments. And obviously, Susan commented, right? If you don't do it, then there are ways to either shift to a future date or cancel it, and there's costs associated with all the money. Okay, with that, I'm open for public comments. If anyone from the members of the audience would like to speak to the council, come forward, or anyone who called in through Zoom would like to speak to the council, please raise your hands. No one is coming forward from the chamber. Joseph, anyone raising their hand?
No hands raised.
No hands raised, so I'm going to close the public comments, council. Time for discussions.
I'll speak up. So I do recognize that we probably need to limit some of our offerings this year, but I do not support totally canceling the event. I like the idea of having, even something as simple as fireworks display. People can watch it from various points in town. You don't have to be in the park to watch it. And so at the very least, I think we should have some form of celebration, even if it's just a fireworks show. I'm not opposed to the other. I'm opposed probably to the bounce houses and things like that. But as far as having a band and giving people opportunity to social distance, I'm not opposed to it. But I think at the very least, we should have a fireworks show and let that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Finch. Additional discussions on this topic?
I would agree with what Mr. Finch said. And if we have to roll some of the costs into a more robust fireworks show so they could be seen from different places in our town, it's a celebration about our country and have a little bit of experience in that area. I'm absolutely not in favor of canceling July the 4th events, but if it's fireworks only, that's okay. I think we should be sure that it's big enough to represent what we want. And the rest of the items are nice. We can add those next year if we need to, or we can add those to October the 6th, whichever is appropriate. That's my input.
Additional comments, Mr. Freeman?
Yeah, I mean, as I look, fireworks, I mean, I've seen Sunny Fest 90% of the years from my front lawn. You can see the fireworks all over town. Absolutely do not cancel the fireworks, but everything else, I mean, I'm just trying to go through all the things. The concert, it's very difficult to space out. I mean, once stage isn't all that huge, the bouncy houses are no. I mean, yeah, I'm with the other councilman. Fireworks for sure, and then maybe just limit it to that this year.
Thank you. Additional comments? Seeger?
I agree. I've been somewhat concerned about it as to what we were going to do, but putting a little bit more effort financially into the fireworks, which I can't see from my front or back. I can hear them, but fortunately, we have a daughter and son-in-law that let us come sit in the circle in front of their house. But I'm for that. I kind of like the thought and the idea, except I think October 6th is not a Friday or a Saturday. I kind of like the idea of maybe having fireworks for the police opening, but then it tugs at my heartstrings, as Mr. Allen said, about not celebrating our country at the same time. And both of them have pretty equal significance in my opinion, and worthy causes. But everybody's accustomed to the July Sunny Fest, June Sunny Fest, and I think we ought to go that way. We just need to make it a little bit more extravagant. Even maybe, the senior parade worked out pretty good, I think, or over the weekend. I don't know if it'd be worthwhile to have a parade. We didn't seem to have a social distancing issue with regard to that. I think a lot of people enjoyed it, and maybe that's another way to kind of help build town spirit and morale during the course of the day. What day does the 3rd fall on? Is it a Friday? I don't know if we could do a late afternoon parade or not. Just a thought. It's maybe way too much of a difficult to put that together, but at least the more extensive firework display, I think, is a good idea.
Anyone else?
I think it's a great idea to have fireworks. And residents may have a parade in Homestead on that Saturday. We can always look into a parade on Friday too.
Come to Homestead.
Or come to Homestead on Saturday.
Anyone else? I think, Council, what I heard is 21st is a go with just the fireworks. Did I capture that somewhat right? So is that clear enough direction, or we need to be more specific on anything?
Yes, sir. That's clear enough. I just for purposes of y'all are here right now, so I don't have to chase answers down. my vision of what you're saying is that we will close the park so that people don't gather there. Normally, we provide a lot of staff in the park. We provide traffic control, all of that. So I think, to me, based upon your recommendation, we would close the park. I can talk to SISD about would they allow people to park in their parking lot if they were in a situation where they couldn't see it, so that that would create the social distancing if people couldn't see it from their yard. And we'll work on, is there something that we can do to kind of maybe have some kind of contest or poster contest for the front yard or something that just kind of gets people in the mood for it. But that would be our recommendation, is to keep people out of the park, because then I have to have staff and police and a lot of other people there with them. So I hope that y'all are comfortable with that, and then try to take those expenses and beef up the fireworks show. Is that fair enough?
Mr. Allen?
I don't think that we were necessarily proposing to close the Sunnyvale Park. That didn't necessarily mean that we had to have resources there, but we have events in our park now that we don't monitor that traffic, people come and go, and some weekends there's a lot of people there. I'm not necessarily saying that we should advocate the park open, come hang out, but I'm also not saying that I don't think we should necessarily shut the park, which really doesn't require any staff to have a park open, does it?
But if you know that the fireworks display is happening, hundreds and hundreds of people are attuned to, okay, when the fireworks is going, that's where we go. So, if you're in agreement that we won't put any traffic control or staffing in the park, I'm a little concerned about what that might end up looking like. But you've lived here a lot longer than me and know how.
I'd have to agree with town manager and I understand where you're coming from too, Larry, but people that are coming to the park now are not coming in the throngs that they're going to come to the park to be able to see the fireworks display when we advertised that there would be a fireworks display. And maybe we just need to get the word out through our mechanisms of getting the word out that, hey guys, we've got a little bit of time to think about this, but hey guys, please don't congregate at the park just to go see the fireworks. There'll be places around town where we're increasing the number of fireworks, and we're able to do this because we don't have to be policing the park to make sure that too many people have not congregated there. It's just a thought. I think that the town manager and staff can come up with a good plan that ensures not only the fire safety, but the health safety of all. Maybe we don't have to chain the park closed, but again, getting the social word out. And maybe there'd be some feedback through the social networking that says, you guys are crazy. We're going to go sit and put our lawn chair out there by the fireworks.
Just
And
remember that a lot of the people who attend this event aren't from Sunnyvale.
Yeah.
From other
That's a good point, too.
surrounding communities who, it's just a nice place to come watch fireworks. So, I'm getting texts from the police department right now expressing concern that we would have big crowds in the park. And, with those big crowds comes traffic control. And we normally we contract with SISD to have shuttle buses who bring people to the park because there's not a lot of parking.
So if we have, you know how I feel about this. So if we have people showing up at SISD, then are we going to be required to put police over there? And so, I guess what you're saying is if we offer this thing and people gather, we have to have a law enforcement presence to make sure that people social distance and wear masks or whatever. And I don't think that's our intent. I get a little frustrated with this because a lot of governments communicate what is acceptable and what behavior we're supposed to have during this crisis. And it is an individual decision at some point to say that I'm going to be wise about how I gather. And so we can provide guidelines, but as far as to go up to say, if we offer any event, we must have a law enforcement presence wherever. I understand the park. I don't like the fact that we're going to say we're going to close a park on the 4th of July when people would generally go out and enjoy maybe a picnic or something at a park. The fact that we're having to say we're going to close it because we don't trust somebody to have good judgment about how they might socially distance in an area. And so I get a little frustrated by that. But I think we have to be open-minded about this, and maybe we discuss this a little bit more about what our response is going to be, because we're a society of adults, and we have to make adult decisions. And so at some point, we provide the guidelines, and we say, this is it. I understand the chief's concern, but where do we stop? Do we say that at Jobson North Park, we're going to have people because somebody might gather in a parking lot or at the school? I mean, I get it, but if we say the school, then the school's going to want law enforcement presence as well. And even if we say you have to be socially distanced. And so I just worry about us going too far about this, and maybe we need to have some more discussions about it. Maybe we say at this point, Mayor, let's move forward with the plan of fireworks, and that's our plan. But then we get together and maybe have a little more discussion about how we communicate.
I think you're right. I think the first part is easy, right? That's some decisions to move forward. I'm taking a slightly different angle. It's not the enforcement of social distancing or masks. That's not really what in my mind I heard. But I was thinking that if 1,000 people gather, 500 people, it's a safety security issue we need to be mindful of. That's what I'm talking. That's not should be social responsibility, but there's large crowd, even churches, right? Large crowd. That's really what I was looking for, not to say, you didn't wear the mask. I don't think.
Okay, and I'll give you
looking
that,
that way.
but then if we're afraid of that wherever, then do we even have the fireworks? If we're afraid that people may gather for whatever, if it becomes a public event where we feel like we have the law enforcement presence, and what is that criteria? And that's why I was saying maybe we go back and we talk to Chief and we figure out what his criteria would be for saying that this may be a public safety issue, regardless of virus.
Before we get off on this safety rant, most of us grew up watching fireworks on the side of the road or somebody else's parking lot, and there wasn't traffic control. We just pulled off to the side of the road somewhere and watched them. So I don't really see that being much different than this. We're going to have fireworks, but there's nothing at the park. If you want to show up and sit with nothing at the park, okay. If you want to pull off the side of the road, but that's going to happen all across North Texas where there's going to be fireworks, and people are going to pull off the side of the road to see the fireworks, and they just do that, and there's no traffic control. And I'm not saying we shouldn't dig a little deeper into what the potential might be, but yeah, social distancing is not law. It's not a mandated law anywhere. It's a recommendation. And to Councilman Finch's point, we've got to be responsible or not responsible, or the case is going to be. But anyway, anyway, I'll stop there on that. But my vision of fireworks is we have the fireworks, and then people do what they want. But we're going to push them off to the school district and say, okay, now y'all got to deal with it. I don't think Mr. Williams would be very excited about that prospect. But
the idea was school district just to have a place for people to park. Similar to some people, so they can watch it from their house.
Yeah,
Just in a parking lot is only, I think that's what she meant.
yeah, and some of them will be parked on the side of the road on the highway like they are year in and year out. There's
All
no
the time,
control
all the-
over there.
happens all the time.
So, yeah, I think we want to be safe and diligent about whatever we make, but it doesn't mean that we have to have traffic control all over the town.
Okay, if I can just interject, because I feel like a lot of things have been added to what I said. So I just want to make sure my feelings are very clear. Is I 100% agree that people are adults. If they don't want to social distance, so be it. But if you have that many people potentially showing up in the park and all these parking lots with no traffic control and no staffing and no police presence, you're going to have issues. And my biggest concern is asking our staff to work in the middle of 1,000 people that they're highly exposed. I mean, it goes in the face of everything that we're trying to work towards, just like you are up here. So I just want to make sure that my perspective is clear. I'm not trying to say people can't gather or anything. And I 100% would never suggest that we're sending people to SISD without a full-blown plan to deal with that. The suggestion was people might be able to park there and watch the fireworks from their vehicle. But again, I haven't even broached that. It was a suggestion to try to respond to somebody's concern about people who couldn't see it from their home. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm not suggesting we're policing people wearing masks or social distancing. I'm just suggesting that I feel like it would be irresponsible to host an event that we know has huge influx of people and not have staff present to deal with those issues. And I mean, I just wanted to make sure what my perspective was clear, because a lot kind of got glommed onto what I said. So thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for those comments, Susan. I appreciate you clarifying. One question out of your comments. Do you feel like that we can have a fireworks show and accomplish your goals?
Yes,
of-
absolutely. I feel like what you all were proposing, which is we beef it up. We ask them if, we can pay a little bit extra and get extra height on the event. I suggested, like, I think somebody made the suggestion to me about, goodie bags that people could come in the week before and pick up that would be, a party in a bag for the family in their front yard, or encourage residents, go in your front yard and watch so residents can see each other. A lot of ideas like that I think are really positive, and I 100% would support us doing that and getting the spirit, figuring out a way that we do this while not encouraging exposure. There's one thing to tell people they can't get together, but for us to overtly encourage people to gather, for me, that's just not a responsible government response. But I also agree we can't control if people gather at their homes or elsewhere or in the park during the day for a picnic. But by dark, people should be out of the park by that time. So I 100% think we can do this, and I think it can be so positive and, bring the community together. My preference would be that we do it in a way that doesn't bring 1,000 people into a small space and doesn't create, situation where I'm sending staff into the middle of the gathering.
Yeah, I will tell you this, you come out and you say we're doing fireworks, you're gonna have cars park here, you're gonna have cars park at Town Hall, you're gonna have cars park at Sunnyvale ISD and walk over. Everyone knows where they park when they come to this thing. You won't be able to stop it.
Well, that's my concern is
I mean,
based
you
on what your
won't be able
concern
to stop it.
was, how can we be successful with your concerns? We circle back around and say, we don't want all this to happen. Okay, if I say that, but I want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up to have this event and then create a problem.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm asking the question back to you. Can we do this effectively with your and Chief's concerns about the possible public safety issues?
I do think that there'll probably still be traffic issues. You're right. One way that we could try to, limit the external people from coming is to do our communication about this direct mail, like one of our newsletters, versus doing ads and, big ads on social media and elsewhere. And that way we can really tell the story of how we want people to participate, participate from your home. Does that mean people still won't come park in different parking lots around town? Right, but that's different than getting out of your car and sitting in close proximity in the park. And the other thing is, every year we've done things like spray the park for mosquitoes, because that time of year and, at that time of night, the mosquitoes, they're bad even when we do this extra spraying, which was several $100s. So there's a lot of expenses that we go to, as well as putting staff on the ground out there. So again, just my recommendation. I totally defer to you. You're the policy makers, but because it does directly affect staff, I felt like I needed to share my thoughts.
I think this is what I'm hearing is council does appreciate the safety of the staff. I don't think anybody is saying to put staff at risk. I know staff work very hard for all these events. I don't think anybody's asking to put staff out there just like we do at Expo. I don't think that's the expectation. But the desire is to have the fireworks and see how best to do it. I think that's really the question is, right? And you threw a bunch of ideas there. Do we need to think about, come back one more time on this with ideas, or?
Yeah, that, or if you want to appoint a subcommittee to work directly with me on how we best can achieve it. I'd love to, I know we have 2 members of our event subcommittee, and then maybe Mr. Finch or Mr.
I say we actually already do have a 4th of July subcommittee.
I think it's just a small details, right? That's all really, not the big picture. The big picture, I think everybody's good to go with it. How do we control the traffic? And that's really what Susan's asking for. Park your for it? You and Freeman?
Tax season is July 15th. I'm probably out.
I volunteer,
On the
Councilmember
subcommittee.
Freeman.
What's that?
I volunteer, Councilmember Freeman.
Yeah.
No, he's going to be too busy,
Okay,
but
so he's
I'm
busy.
I'm
Okay.
happy to.
Clark,
Yes.
anyone else
I'm happy
want to
to.
participate in that?
There you go, Eldridge.
Anyone else?
I just want to comment on an alternative plan that I happen to think of, and that would be this, to buy every household a box of sparklers and let everybody stand out in the front yard.
All right, okay, so. Okay, I think we made a decision on the 11, right? Okay. Can we move on to the next item?
Do we need to vote?
There's no vote, is it? Okay.
Make a motion to approve item number 11 as presented.
No. I guess the vote will be, I'm just going to say it and you can correct me. I think the vote is to hold 71st at a lower scale and have the fireworks in place, everything else canceled. And the details of the arrangements will be made through subcommittee with the town manager and the council member Eldridge and Kevin. Good enough? Can someone make the motions?
So moved.
Mr. Egan, make the motion. Second.
Second.
By Clark. Anyone additional discussions? All in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 7. I don't know why you're grinning, but okay. Moving on to item number 12. Item number 12. Receive status update regarding the timeline and implementation of the police department. Chief, good evening, sir.
Good evening, town manager, mayor, and council. We're in the final background and polygraph stages with about 7 applicants right now. I expect to make a couple conditional job offers by the end of this week and probably more next week. We have an additional 8 candidates right now that have signed up for our entrance exam in June. And we're getting more and more every day. We have to weed through them to make sure they meet the qualifications, but we are still getting applicants for the next round. The 4th sergeant has accepted his conditional job offer. We're just waiting on a few things to wrap up his application process, and he will begin work June 1st. And I plan on introducing him at the next council meeting. And that goes along also with our admin assistant, who has been hired and begins work on June 1st. Her name is Angie Webb, and she has over 25 years of police, fire, EMS, and emergency medical dispatch experience also, and records. Our tables for our patrol briefing room are in and installed. We now have 4 patrol cars that are functional and 2 admin cars. Our in-car and body-worn cameras are in the process of being programmed this week. Joseph and our vendor GTAC has set up our cloud storage, and our officer training will begin next week. And our body cams and mobile computers are part of that package, and they will be installed as well. And we are working on some record agreements for our tows when we make arrests and impound vehicles. That's all.
Chief, it still looks like October 1 is a good date.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for everything you do. Council question for Chief. Okay, there are none. Moving on to item number 13. Mayor and council request for future staff updates, agenda items. Are there any? Mr. Egan?
Mayor, just a comment. Can we mirror image the screen of the chambers? Because it's backwards.
Yeah.
It's been driving me crazy. I keep looking at it and going, like, that ain't me. That guy's bald.
Let me work on that.
What you mean? He's talking about me, not you.
What you mean?
He's talking about me.
Mayor, I have one item
Yes, sir.
for staff. actually for Susan probably. I'm getting a lot of complaints again about people riding golf carts, kids, 10, 11 years old. Now they're on the phones driving through the, particularly probably Stony Creek and Homestead. I don't know what we do about it. You guys have already sent out data and whatever, but it seems like during the whatever we're in, it's gotten a lot worse. It's very prevalent. And I think my concern, kids want to do that's fine, I guess, except now we got 10, 11-year-olds driving with their cell phones on golf carts, and someone's going to get hurt. I don't know what we can do. I'm not trying to burden the staff. I'm just throwing it out there for saying, hey, maybe we need to brainstorm this. I'm sorry.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Yeah, so Larry, we're getting lots of complaints in Stone Canyon as well as Stony Creek. The problem is it's legal now to drive a golf cart with a slow moving vehicle sign on it. It's also legal in certain circumstances to register an ATV. The problem is you still have to be a licensed driver to operate these things. So we're getting mixed complaints on just golf carts in general, and then we're getting them with kids driving them. Our enforcement action, once we have our ticket riders in place and everything, and our option will be to cite juveniles without driver's licenses. Other than that, just operating. So the violation is operating without a license, not so much operating a golf cart on a public street, because that now is legal.
Yeah, and I actually don't have a problem with that at all. It's just the young kids that are driving them around town, not paying attention. I'm marginally good sometimes anyway, so to put that on a 10-year, and I've seen this just recently with a 7th grader on their cell phone driving down and had to swerve off the road to miss somebody. And they're also, and it's probably those younger kids, and they're also driving on the walking paths too.
Yes.
I get all my phone calls from. So anyway, thanks, Chief. I appreciate your feedback.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, if none, can I have a motion to adjourn the executive session? Pursuant to Chapter 551 and Economic Development. The agenda is Project STG. Motion made by Mr. Allen. Or second by Mr. Egan. Everyone heard the motion? All in favor signify. All opposed, motion passed 7-0. Time is 9:40 and we are on executive session. Thank you, Joseph. Thanks, staff.